After the catastrophic day of reversal, the world was plunged into darkness and chaos. For 100 agonizing years, a desperate war against demonic forces raged on, a ceaseless conflict that consumed generations. The forces of humanity and their allies fought bravely against hellish beasts, from savage orcs to horned monstrosities, in a seemingly endless cycle of bloodshed and sacrifice. The cost of this eternal war was staggering, a price paid in both lives and land. The heterogeneous Union suffered over 290,000 casualties, while the civilian death toll climbed to a horrifying 4.8 million. Vast stretches of once fertile farmland, 3.7 million hectares, were left devastated, amounting to an incomprehensible 2.4 billion petra in property damage, leaving the realm scarred and broken. Now, the situation had become more dire than ever. The relentless demon army had pushed their way to the Fog Front, the last bastion of defense for the Allied forces. A war map, marked with grim, blood-red strokes, showed the encroaching darkness threatening to consume even the holy land of the Decaphne and the sacred Jeokun ranges. However, under the silent watch of a crescent moon, life in the military encampment continued its monotonous, brutal rhythm. For the soldiers stationed at the precipice of oblivion, the grand scale of the war meant little. Even in this desperate situation, their daily lives of duty, discipline, and survival did not change. In the depths of a troubled sleep, a memory surfaced. A young recruit, his face bruised and swollen, stood with his head bowed in exhaustion and pain. From the oppressive shadows before him, a voice cut through the darkness, uttering a single, pivotal word that would define his existence: Transcendent. The shadowed figure, an imposing officer, called out to the recruit, "Hey, sentry gate." His voice was sharp, demanding attention that the weary soldier struggled to give. The command was repeated, a harsh sound in the grim training grounds, trying to pierce the fog of Gate's fatigue. With a sudden, rough movement, the officer seized Gate by his uniform, shaking him from his daze. "Sentry Gate," he barked again, the words finally registering. This was the crucible that forged soldiers, a place where weakness was beaten out until only strength remained. Gate looked up, his eyes meeting the officer's unseen gaze in the dark. "Does being a Transcendent get you discharged from the Corps?" the officer questioned, his tone dripping with skepticism and challenge. With a heavy breath, his greatsword a heavy weight on his back, Gate gave the only answer he could. "No, sir." The officer's warning was a cold promise of future hardship. "There are a great many people waiting to see you fail because of your cluelessness," he sneered. "Starting tomorrow, you will not drink water, you will not take off your armor, you will not speak, sit, or sleep. If I so much as see your teeth showing, you're all finished." The brutal orders continued, each one designed to break the recruits down to their very core. "As soon as you wake, assemble everyone, all ranks, in a line. The Bodhi tree side is where the high ranks hide out, so tell them to go around by the stream path and not get noticed." Exhausted but obedient, Gate acknowledged the command. "Yes, understood." The blare of a horn shattered the nightmare, pulling Gate back to the present. He jolted awake in his cot, the ghost of the past clinging to him. "Ah, Sergeant Gate, you awake?" a fellow soldier asked from the tent's entrance. Gate grunted in affirmation, rubbing the sleep and the haunting memories from his eyes. A status report confirmed the current stalemate had reached its 372nd day. Gate, now identified as an intermediate swordsman of the heterogeneous Union, touched the scar on his lip. "Do you dream of your rookie days? How unpleasant," he muttered to himself, the memory leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Shaking off the lingering dream, Gate strapped on his gear and seized his massive red and white sword. He strode purposefully out of his tent, his expression hardened by years of command and combat. His first order of business was clear as he demanded, "Who was the second shift on watch yesterday?" An elven archer, Scully, promptly answered, "Magic Division 2, Morris, sir." She then reported that the duty officer, a dwarf named Moai, had caused a ruckus at dawn with a torch, waking everyone. Gate grimaced, blaming the dwarf's incompetence for his terrible dream. His irritation growing, Gate wondered where the errant sentry was hiding. "Oh, really?" he grumbled, his patience wearing thin. Scully reminded him of the strict hierarchy, saying, "Even if we let it slide, the high ranks won't stay still." He knew she was right. Discipline was absolute. Deciding to deal with the troublemaker later, Gate focused on his next task. "Give me the list of incoming recruits," he commanded. Scully handed him a clipboard, adding with a hint of anticipation, "The scripture says the Transcendent will appear from this batch. Try to filter them well." The term Transcendent carried immense weight. They were the chosen few, warriors capable of pulling one of the 10 legendary deco weapons from the Haitian or of the Red Cloud Mountains. These individuals were their world's champions, destined for greatness and burdened with the hope of all. This hope was rooted in a prophecy from the great prophet Saint Vinus. It was foretold that 10 Transcendents would gather at the same time in place. Their combined power would be the key to piercing the heart of the seemingly invincible demon lord, the Black Star Dragon. The Black Star Dragon was a creature of immense and terrifying power, a being whose very presence blighted the land. Slaying it was the only path to ending the cruel, century-long war. Thinking of the prophecy, Gate looked at the list and grumbled. "Is being a Transcendent a crime? I'm a swordsman. Why do I have to review the Black Magic Division?" He continued to complain as he scanned the documents. "What can we do? They say there are no troops." Scully, noticing his skepticism, nervously asked, "And can we even trust that Vinus scripture?" Gate waved off her concern. "No one comes to the admin office right now anyway." "But Intermediate Gate and Morris's enlistment matched the prophecy too," Scully insisted. "We have to believe it." Gate conceded her point with a thoughtful silence, then remarked, "Even if the Black Magic Department produces a Transcendent, their mentor will be Uldring. Poor soul. That man has a serious inferiority complex toward Transcendents." Gate pondered the extravagant promises used to lure in volunteers: triple salary, a guaranteed government post, even a statue in Peace Plaza. The incentives had to be high to offset the immense risk. Scully's voice turned grave. "Pick someone with a really strong mental state. Rumor has it if one more person deserts, the higher-ups will split the central unit and send us to the south and east fronts." Gate scoffed at her words. "You fool. Do I choose the Transcendent?" he asked rhetorically, a grim smile playing on his lips as red energy flared around him. "The weapon chooses." Scully realized her mistake as Gate reminded her of their precarious reality. "If we get breached here and lose the stalemate, it's game over. Talk some sense, please." Scully chuckled nervously, realizing the truth in his words. At that moment, they spotted a figure on a distant watchtower. "That troublemaker is here early for once," Gate noted. As the figure approached, Scully snapped into a salute, chirping, "Unity. When did you arrive, Senior Uldring?" The newcomer was Uldring, a senior black mage of the Second Allied Company. The Dark Elf sat with his arms crossed, his expression cold and judgmental. "Is bad-mouthing people openly a daily thing for that guy?" Gate muttered under his breath, then turned to his partner. "Scully, let's start." The two of them walked onto a wooden platform, overlooking the training yard. Below, rows upon rows of new recruits stood at silent attention under a gray, drizzling sky. They were a sea of grim, determined faces, each one a potential hero or another casualty in the endless war. Gates' gaze swept over the volunteers from the Black Magic Division, his expression one of pure contempt. He couldn't help but feel a deep-seated distrust for those who dabbled in such arts. Maybe because they are black magic volunteers, he thought to himself, they're all rotten to the core. The recruits stood, a motley crew of battle-worn and weary individuals. Gates' voice suddenly erupted, echoing across the yard. "Attention, everyone, attention. Did you come here for a camping trip? Voice double, how many times?" The recruits flinched, shouting back in unison, "Double." Gates' rage seemed to manifest as a phantom tiger roaring behind him, a projection of his immense spiritual pressure. "Triple, how many times?" he bellowed, his voice shaking the very air. The recruits, now terrified into perfect discipline, screamed back, "Triple." Attention. With their attention firmly secured, Gate began his speech. You are the volunteers for the 2nd Allied Company's spiritual power training. One of you will lift the Deca weapon and be drafted as a Transcendent. He scanned their faces, his eyes sharp. Even if not selected, you will be dispatched to key points on the front. This is a very important role to bring momentum to our side. Induction score top ranker, number 7, he called out, his eyes landing on a silver-haired elf named Swan. His internal assessment was swift and critical. Looks a bit ditzy. In this high-stakes standoff, a lack of focus could prove fatal for everyone. His gaze then moved to the next trainee, and he recoiled slightly. Whoa, what is this guy? He thought, taken aback by the fierce look in the eyes of trainee number 29 Xenia. The raw intensity was almost frightening. He cleared his throat and continued. I hope you focus on the evaluation and training until the end. Then, he noticed trainee number 13, Narks Windsor von Beckenberg III, and inwardly sighed. Ah, is that the only son of the wealthy Beckenberg family? He mused. The Beckenbergs were the greatest of the dark elf nobles, having amassed a fortune supplying jewels to royalty during the era of peace. A series of family portraits revealed a lineage famous for overwhelmingly strong paternal genetics. Each generation a near-perfect copy of the last. Gates' eyes narrowed as he saw the recruit's hands. He's covered in heart's chrome jewelry, he observed with disdain. His fingers have turned purple. Is that okay? Gates stood tall, projecting an aura of immense power and authority. The instructor standing before you, he announced, his voice ringing with pride, is the leader of the Transcendent Special Spirit Force, Vanguard Gate. His status was clear. He was an elite unit leader, a Transcendent, and the man who would forge them into warriors. The recruits murmured amongst themselves, their eyes wide with awe. Transcendent, is the sword on his back a Deca weapon? Meanwhile, Morris, the gnome Transcendent, nervously tried to manage the logistics, still shaken from being caught sleeping on duty and terrified of what Gate might do. Morris instructed the new recruits, his voice small and timid. Close up to the front, those with ill-fitting clothes, write down your desired replacement size. He looked at the request sheet from number 13 and his eyes widened in disbelief. This number 13 guy? He's exchanging everything. A bead of sweat trickled down Morris's temple as he stared at the smirking recruit. Ah, it's that guy, he thought, his heart sinking. He remembered Scully's warning about certain problematic soldiers, and it seemed he was face to face with the first one. Watching the scene unfold from the platform, Gates smirked. The dynamics of any new group were always the same. I don't know about the A-listers, he mused to himself, but the screw-ups are clearly visible. Let's filter well. Aldring strode over to Gate, his expression unreadable. Hey Gate, I'll handle guiding the kids to the training barracks, he offered. As the dark elf led the marching recruits away, Scully whispered, isn't his scheme to confiscate the smuggled Biokma leaves? Looks like he waited just for that. I know, whatever. Just turn a blind eye, Gate replied, dismissing the petty corruption as unimportant. He then turned to Scully. Troop guidance is done, so go rest quickly. Are you okay not sleeping after duty? Eager to escape, Scully quickly agreed and hurried off. With Scully gone, Gates' predatory gaze fell upon the trembling gnome. Hey Morris, you, he began, approaching the terrified soldier. Are you sick? Look at me for a sec, he said, his voice a low growl. Morris began to cry, sweat and tears pouring down his face in sheer terror. But before Gate could act, a heavy boot connected squarely with his jaw, sending him stumbling. It was Jaga, a senior knight, who had appeared out of nowhere. Ignoring Gate, Jaga immediately turned on the defenseless Morris, kicking the gnome viciously to the ground with a furious roar. Jaga, the senior knight of the 2nd Allied Company, ground his boot into Morris's head, his face a mask of contempt. Thanks to you, I slept so well yesterday, you worthless nuisance, he sneered, clearly blaming the gnome for the dawn disturbance. Morris struggled and choked, unable to breathe. Senior Jaga, you'll kill him, Gate warned, his own anger rising. Jaga just laughed. Gnomes don't die from this much, he said, finally removing his boot. The battered Morris staggered to his feet, bloodied but alive. "See, he's fine," Jaega taunted, but his amusement was short-lived. His rage still unsated, he turned and struck another nearby soldier without provocation. "Huh, he's not dying," he snarled, kicking the new victim. "Standing just fine, this troublesome fellow." Gates' patience finally snapped. He lunged forward and grabbed Jaega's arm, his grip like iron, stopping the senseless assault. "Hey, let go," Jaega ordered, his eyes narrowing dangerously. When Gate didn't release him, he challenged, "Won't let go." Gate looked at him, his expression firm. "This is enough. Please stop." Jaega's face contorted with rage. "This upstart is trying to be my equal now," he seethed, his eyes blazing with fury. He loomed over the swordsman. "I'm Jaega. Want another scratch on your face?" But Gate did not flinch. His own eyes hardened, a silent promise that he would not back down. In the hallowed halls of memory, a lone figure draped in sacred vestments pored over an ancient text. The scripture spoke of a vague and distant prophecy, a promise whispered through generations. As the long, arduous wait for its fulfillment faded into the mists of obscurity, the scene dissolved into a vision of a blood-soaked battlefield, where the very earth was scarred by the ravages of endless war. Suddenly, a surge of immense power ripped through the air, causing soldiers to cry out in alarm. One of them had drawn a Deca-class weapon, a blade of terrifying might that could only signal the arrival of a being beyond mortal limits, a Transcendent. Doubt and disbelief spread through the ranks. To them, the scripture was merely folklore, its prophecies nothing more than stories told to frighten children, not a reality to be witnessed on the field of battle. The truth of their world was far more brutal and pragmatic. The delicate balance of this perpetual war, a chaotic symphony of clashing steel and monstrous roars, was not maintained by prophecy, but by a rigid and unforgiving hierarchy. Warriors of immense power carved paths through their enemies, their every action dictated by rank and the unwritten laws of the battlefield. In a world teeming with so many different species, from powerful giants to nimble elves, order was not a luxury. It was a necessity for survival. The concept of the Transcendent was a carefully constructed illusion, a powerful title used by the ruling class to inspire both fear and loyalty. It was a bait for control, because mere folklore could never be forged into the tangible authority of official rank. Returning to the tense standoff, Jaega's voice dripped with scorn as he loomed over Gate. He accused the swordsman of favoritism, of protecting the gnomes simply because they were both rumored to be transcendent. "Want me to add another scar to your face?" he snarled, his threat hanging heavy in the air. But Gate did not yield. His golden eyes held a firm, unshakable resolve, a silent promise that this time he would not back down. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, a panicked voice cut through the air. "High-rank Jaega," an elf archer cried out, her eyes wide with alarm. Jaega, his fury momentarily diverted, whipped around with an expression of pure annoyance. "What is it?" he demanded, his patience already worn thin. The archer quickly relayed her message, her voice trembling slightly. An officer was summoning all high-ranking members of the Night Division to the administrative squad. Sensing trouble, Jaega's face soured. "I'll see you guys at the barracks," he grumbled, before shoving the archer aside and stalking away. He had to deal with the consequences of his actions. As Jaega departed, the archer looked on in confusion. Gate explained grimly, "That brute Jaega, his violent instincts have only gotten worse." He then turned his attention to the small gnome, Morris, who had been the target of the assault. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. The gnome nodded, explaining that he had managed to cast a defense buff on himself, allowing him to withstand the blows. Gate's anger simmered. That wretch came all the way from Barracks 3 just to mess with Morris. "What dedication," he said with biting sarcasm. The archer added another piece to the puzzle, suggesting Jaega was also sniffing around for a third-generation tycoon among the new trainees, hoping to gain favor. The image of a smirking, orc-like trainee flashed in their minds. Gate turned his stern gaze back to Morris. "Why do you make such mistakes when your life is already on hard mode by default?" he chided. Transcendent beings especially need to be careful. Don't you know those types have insane inferiority complexes? Morris mumbled an apology, but Gate waved it off. Don't apologize to me. Just use your head for a while, he said, his tone softening slightly as they walked on. After a moment of silence, Gate asked a rather blunt question about Morris's frequent need for a latrine. Morris, unfazed, explained it was simply a matter of known biology. According to the Interspecies Guide for Wise Continental Living, their faster metabolism and sensitive organs meant their digestive cycles were much quicker than humans, and most were lactose intolerant. Gate glanced at the report in his hands, sighing as he read that Morris had been woken during duty sleep. Officers and enlisted, no one normal in this unit, he muttered to himself. He turned to the gnome and the archer. Anyway, both of you clean up and go inside. I need to check on the trainee barracks now. The scene shifted to the gloomy interior of the trainee barracks. The air was thick with tension. Among the recruits sat Xania, a formidable dark elf whose intense gaze was fixed on another trainee, a silver-haired elf named Swan. Swan, feeling the weight of the stare, silently fumed. What in the world is with that brute? Xania's unnerving stare continued, making Swan deeply uncomfortable. Why's he been staring at me out of nowhere? She thought, her irritation growing. Her thoughts were interrupted as another dark elf strode into the tent, a smug look on his face and a net full of confiscated cigarettes in hand. Swan's eyes narrowed. She recognized him as the same pest who had bothered her at Club Velvet. Her mind flashed back to that night at Club Redunia. She and her friend were enjoying their drinks when the very same dark elf and his companion had approached their table. With a sleazy grin, he had tried to invite them to join his group, completely misreading the room. In the memory, Swan had coolly dismissed him. Sorry, she'd said, her voice laced with ice. We're here for deep conversation. After the men had reluctantly walked away, her friend had questioned her decision, noting they seemed decent enough, but Swan had already made up her mind. Swan had explained her preference to her friend, stating she didn't like sharp-eyed stick figures and preferred men who had a more masculine presence. The memory brought a faint, melancholic smile to her face in the present. Those were good times. She thought, the dreary barracks a stark contrast to the lively club. The dark elf, now clearly in the role of an instructor, addressed the room. Anyway, he began, before training starts tomorrow, there's an explanation about tetanus shots. The trainees grumbled, one asking why healers weren't sufficient. The instructor ignored them. Maintain discipline until the relief escort arrives. Got it, he barked. When the response was too quiet, he roared, voices twice as loud, and the trainees shouted back, yes. After the instructor left, an awkward silence filled the tent. Swan simmered with indignation. The quiet was broken by another trainee, who began complaining loudly about the instructor's arrogance. If I met him in civilian life, that loser couldn't even make eye contact. He boasted, stretching dramatically. His tirade was cut short by another trainee. Hey, quiet down, he said dismissively. Stand up straight, you fool. The argument escalated instantly, devolving into a volley of insults and posturing. Swan let out a weary sigh, smoke curling from her lips. What in the world are these simpletons doing? She wondered, utterly exhausted by the immaturity. Just as fists were about to fly, the tent flap was pulled aside, and Gate stepped through. The sight of the Transcendent instructor immediately silenced the room. A wave of nervous energy washed over the trainees. Swan swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest as his intimidating presence filled the small space. Gate's gaze fell upon trainee number 13, the orc-like Narts. Watch the contact, Gate said, his voice cold and flat. Swan stared, bewildered. What's with this guy who has reject written all over his face? She thought, confused by Gate's hostility. And shouldn't I be the one who's obviously upset? This is awful in every way. Gate scanned the paperwork in his hand. Why are there so many uniform exchanges today? He asked the room. They're all from one guy. Who is this? Nart stepped forward, a strange smile on his face. That's me, he announced, before launching into a bizarre explanation about his family's fortune teller advising him to avoid earth tones. Nartz continued his nonsensical ramble, claiming Brown didn't suit his winter-cool tone. Gates' patience finally snapped. "Stop sniffing and talking nonsense," he ordered, his voice dangerously low. "Just wear it. Get in." Gate fixed Nartz with a piercing stare. "What are you doing not going in?" he demanded. Nartz trembled, muttering, "Go, go," before his fear erupted into a shocking display of defiance. "Don't gaslight me," he screamed, his face contorted in a bizarre mix of terror and rage. A shadow fell over Gates' face as his expression hardened into stone. The barracks fell deathly silent. The other trainees stared in stunned disbelief at Nartz's outburst. Swan could only curse the turn of events. A slow, cold smile spread across Gates' face. "Jackpot," he said softly, his voice echoing in the quiet tent. "Everyone get down." Without a moment's hesitation, every trainee dropped to the floor. Gates' voice was sharp as a razor's edge. "I'll let it slide today. If anyone acts like a reject one more time, you'll all see real hell for the duration of your stay here." "Got it." A thunderous "yes" was his only reply, the sound of their collective fear. The next day, the mood was somber as the trainees lined up for tetanus shots. The elf archer from the day before administered the injections with a practiced hand. "Hold still," she instructed a dark elf, who grumbled, "Why's an archer giving shots?" His complaint was a mere whisper, a testament to the fear Gate had instilled in them. Morris, his face now patched with bandages, approached Gate. "Do we really have to get this?" he asked. Gate answered with a grim tale. "You know Drenane from the mess squad? The elf healer? The reason she wears a prosthetic is because a goblin's club pierced her calf, and she botched the healing spell." Gate continued, his voice low and serious. "The number of people who die from tetanus due to rusty weapons, it's not a small number. It's brutal." He revealed that even the legendary Archmage Vilcross, a pioneer of healing magic, had never found a way to conquer the disease. Morris shivered, the cold reality of their world setting in. As the gravity of his lesson settled, Gates' attention was drawn to a commotion nearby. An officer was shouting, his voice frantic. "Why didn't you check the count beforehand? Why is one spot empty?" The elf archer ran up to Gate, her eyes wide with panic. "Mid-rank Gate," she cried. Her next words sent a jolt of anger through Gate. 13. Trainee number 13 is missing. Gates' expression twisted into a mask of pure fury. He knew exactly who it was. Number 13, he seethed through clenched teeth, the image of Nartz's defiant face burning in his mind. "That pig." The urgent cry of the elf archer shattered the tense quiet. She sprinted toward Gate, her face a mask of panic. His question of "what's wrong" was met with a revelation that sent a jolt of pure fury through him. "Trainee number 13 is missing," she cried. Instantly, Gate knew. Number 13. Gate seethed, the name echoing in his mind. The smug, defiant face of Nartz burned behind his eyes, a symbol of insubordination and foolishness. All the frustration and anger from his recent confrontations coalesced into a single, explosive thought. That insolent pig. Gates' voice was sharp as he demanded an explanation. "There aren't many dark elves. Didn't you do a head count? Who was the escort?" The archer trembled, recalling the recent transfer. It was high-rank Jaga, whose apathy and aggression had allowed the trainee to slip away unnoticed. The realization that this was Jaga's failure sent a fresh wave of rage through Gate. It was yet another mark of the man's incompetence and carelessness, and now Gate had to clean up the mess. Spinning around, he bellowed to the surrounding soldiers, "Hey, did anyone see where that fool went?" Needing a specialized skill, Gate turned to a dark elf trainee. Trainee number 29, Xenia, Eagle Eye. The stoic dark elf saluted, her gaze sharp and focused. As Gate asked if she'd seen anything, her left eye flared with a brilliant golden light, her unique ability activating to scan the distant landscape. With impossible speed and precision, Xenia located their target. She pointed a single, steady finger toward the horizon, her glowing eye fixed on a point miles away. Gate stared, astonished by the sheer range of her perception. "You can see that distance?" he asked, a note of awe in his voice. Xenia identified the location as the back mountain. The name immediately triggered a horrifying thought in Gate's mind. The back mountain, Deca Weapon Hill. A grim, knowing sneer crossed his face as the trainee's idiotic plan became terrifyingly clear. No way, that foolish boy. Meanwhile, Nart stood alone in a desolate wasteland, a place forbidden to all trainees. Barbed wire and warning signs marked the perimeter, but he paid them no mind, his heart swelling with a deluded sense of purpose. "I am chosen," he whispered to the wind, his eyes fixed on the looming peak of Deca Weapon Hill. He found what he was looking for, a powerful artifact left unguarded. It was a dark magic staff, its pommel a blood red orb pulsing with energy. "Jet black dew," he read, a smug smile spreading across his face. To his twisted mind, this was not a lapse in security, but proof of his destiny. This was prepared for me. The memories of mockery fueled his reckless ambition. Gates' scornful words and the laughter of his peers echoed in his ears. Clenching his fists, Nart's face hardened with resolve. "Now, it's time to show them," he vowed. He reached for the staff, his mind alight with visions of power and vindication. "These lowly people, I'll shut them all up," he seethed, his hand hovering over the pulsating orb. "How dare they look at me with those eyes, knowing who I am?" Just as his fingers were about to make contact, a frantic shout ripped through the air. "Hey, don't do it!" Gate and Morris had arrived, their faces etched with alarm. "If you touch that now, your arm could be ruined. Come out quickly, you fool." Nartz turned, his expression unervingly calm in the face of their panic. He held them hostage with his own self-destruction. "Don't move," he warned, his voice low and steady. "Or I'll touch it right now." Gate froze mid-stride, trapped, cursing under his breath. With bizarre confidence, Nartz began to lecture his superior officer, accusing him of using cheap psychological tricks to break his will. Gate could only stare in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about?" he stammered, completely baffled by the trainee's delusions. Nartz pressed on, his voice filled with smug superiority. "Be more honest. You're wary of a new Transcendent appearing." He then grandly announced his full title, the heir of the great Beckenberg family, Nartz Windsor von Beckenberg III. Gates' patience finally snapped. "I don't know what makes you think you're a Transcendent," he roared, his voice dripping with scorn. "You have the lowest basic score among all enlisted personnel. Your athletic ability and magic power are at the level of a tree goblin." Gates' tirade continued, trying to drill a sliver of sense into the trainee's head. "Even if you were judged to be a Transcendent, you can't pull out a Deca weapon without a warm-up. Come down quickly." But Nartz was lost in his own world, believing it was his destiny to guide ignorant fools like Gate. Today, will pull out this Deca weapon and accept the fate given to me," Nartz declared, his hand finally closing around the orb. A desperate "don't" was torn from Gates' throat as he lunged forward, but he was too late. The moment his skin touched the orb, a cataclysmic surge of violent purple energy erupted, engulfing Nartz. The power was too much, a raw, untamed force that threw him backward and sent his body into violent convulsions. An inhuman scream of pure agony tore through the air as Gate and Morris could only watch in horror. They sprinted towards the fallen trainee, who was twitching on the ground, guttural noises bubbling from his throat. His face was a contorted mask of pain and ruin. Seeing the life-threatening state Nartz was in, Gate turned to his subordinate with grim urgency. "Morris, there's no time. Get down the mountain first." Elsewhere, a group of dark elf trainees stood before a foreboding cave. Their instructor, a masked dark elf with a stern demeanor, explained the nature of their magic. "Dark magic is close to a curse," he stated, detailing the litany of debuffs it could apply. Among them, the crown jewel, devouring fog resistance training, will be conducted today. The instructor elaborated that the spell was an area of effect skill, indiscriminately striking allies and enemies alike, making resistance essential. As the other trainees listened intently, Swan felt a small moment of relief. "That crazy fool isn't around," she thought, "so I can breathe." Did he desert? The instructor began to channel his magic, a swirling vortex of purple energy manifesting around him. "Everyone confirmed you're wearing your protective scarves, right?" he asked, before ordering them into the fog. Swan grumbled internally about the absurdity of the training, noting that the only reason they'd ever be hit by dark magic was from an enemy's spell. She knew it was an unspoken rule among their kind not to use such magic on each other, for they all understood its debilitating effects. Her thoughts were cut short by a shocking command. "Everyone take off your masks." A wave of dread washed over Swan and the other trainees as they reluctantly complied, knowing the agony that was to come. The instant their faces were bare, the devouring fog took hold. The trainees choked and gagged, their lungs burning. One panicked, trying to bolt, but the instructor brutally grabbed him and shoved him back into the suffocating mist, his expression showing a cruel satisfaction. To heighten the torment, the instructor ordered them to sing a military song amidst their suffering. As her comrades coughed and sputtered, Swan's gaze fell upon the assistant. She saw him for what he was, a petty sadist who solidified his position through devilish acts of cruelty. A chilling thought crossed her mind. If she succeeded in pulling a deca weapon, she would be placed directly under this man's command. The military offered no special treatment for Transcendents, only harder work and the whims of superiors. The idea of catering to this man she hated most was almost unbearable. But then, she remembered the recruitment poster and the promises it held: triple military pay, a guaranteed government position, even a statue erected in Peace Plaza. The allure of money and honor was a powerful motivator. "Forget it," she resolved, gritting her teeth. "For that much, I'll have to endure. Let's persevere." Still, she cursed the hastily made wartime system, full of loopholes and inefficiencies that allowed bullies to thrive. As her thoughts spiraled, the instructor's voice cut through the fog. "Starting from the front row, exit the cave while maintaining formation. Begin." A wave of relief washed over her. Finally over, curse it. As the trainees recovered, Swan reflected on her simple ambitions. Unlike others driven by continental recovery or family vengeance, she was an orphan with no grand cause. Her only goal was to do enough to get by, save money, and get discharged. "Don't die," she told herself. "Just live to 500 years old." Her quiet moment was interrupted by the sight of Gate and Morris returning from the mountain. Gate was carrying the unconscious form of Nartz over his shoulder. A faint, vindicated smile touched Swan's lips. "That reject pig finally got caught," she mused. The dark elf instructor approached Gate, asking about Nartz's condition. Just then, the blonde elf archer rushed toward them again, shouting in desperation. "Mid-rank Gate, there are no healers in the infirmary, the break room, or anywhere in the entire unit." Gate's frustration boiled over. He turned to Morris, but the buffer could only offer apologies, his spells useless for healing. His desperate gaze then fell on the dark elf instructor, who merely scoffed, stating his debuffs were useless on a dying man. Left with no other choice, Gate ordered another frantic search for healers. In that moment of desperation, a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Trainee number 7, Swan." All eyes turned to her as she raised her hand. "That thing," she said, her voice steady. "I think I can solve it with dark magic." The entire group stared at her, stunned into silence. Swan's sharp eyes analyzed the unconscious Nartz, perceiving what others could not. A dark, parasitic entity clung to his body. "A cursed creature is attached," she diagnosed. "A parasitic type debuff. It looks like a dentacula." She explained her theory. Since the dentacula was a creature, albeit in magical form, it could be weakened with a debuff. The instructor immediately dismissed her. "What are you saying, casting dark magic on a cursed creature? Stop talking nonsense and wait for the healers." But Gate, seeing no other option, overruled him. "That makes sense," he declared, his voice firm. "Since it's an emergency, try treating it first. There's nothing to lose, right? If it doesn't work, we'll wait for the healers." Swan turned to the instructor. "May I borrow your staff?" After a tense moment, he handed it over. She took the weapon, her grip firm and confident, and walked toward Narts, an aura of quiet power surrounding her. As she began her incantation, deep purple magic flared to life, swirling around her. An intricate magical circle, glowing with ancient runes, spread across the ground beneath her feet. The air crackled with energy as she focused the spell, channeling it through the staff. The spell struck Narts, and the shadowy dentacula parasite recoiled as if burned. The dark energy of the curse dissolved under the force of her magic, dissipating into nothing more than black dust on the wind. With the curse broken, Swan lowered the staff, her expression calm. Done. A healthy flush returned to Nart's cheeks as he began to stir. The onlookers stared in utter amazement, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Gate and the instructor exchanged a look of disbelief and grudging respect. He's useful, the instructor admitted. Later, in the dead of night, the camp was quiet, but inside a dark, morbid chamber filled with the bones of fallen creatures, Swan lay awake. Her eyes were open, staring into the darkness, her expression troubled by the day's extraordinary events. Under the pale moonlight, a carriage from the military police rolled up to the fortress walls. Inside the infirmary, the archer watched over the recovering Narts. "Mid-rank Gate," she asked quietly. "What happens to him now?" Gate sighed, his face weary from the long day. "Whether they discharge him medically or send him to the brig, the MPs will handle it," Gate replied. The archer shook her head in disbelief. He really thought he was an A-grade Transcendent. No matter how he grew up, is his perception of reality really that shattered? Suddenly, Morris burst into the room, his eyes wide with fear. "Mid-rank Gate, you're summoned to the officer's room." He then added, "Me too." Gate looked over at the archer, a deep sense of unease settling over him. "You and me together? Why?" They were led to the main officer's tent. The air inside was thick with tension. Senior officers were gathered, and in the center of the room, propped up in a bed and being fed by an attendant, was Narts. Why is the atmosphere like this? Morris wondered, his fear palpable. One of the officers began to speak, his voice dripping with false authority as he spun a web of lies. He claimed that Nart's outstanding performance had triggered a crisis of inferiority in the other Transcendents, and that Nart's reckless actions were merely a cry for help to relieve his anxiety. Gates stared, appalled by the blatant distortion of the truth. The officer concluded his fabricated report with a sigh of feigned regret. "Unfortunately, they're still immature. As their senior, I feel devastated. This is all my fault." Another officer, the one Jaga had assaulted, stepped forward, his knuckles white as he gripped his chain necklace. "We also deeply feel responsibility on our side," he said, his voice a low growl, "and will severely discipline both soldiers." His eyes, burning with a cold fire, locked onto Gate as he spat out a single name, Jaga. The officer concluded his fabricated report with a sigh of feigned regret, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Unfortunately, they're still immature. As their senior, I feel devastated." He bowed his head, playing the part of a burdened leader. "This is all my fault." Suddenly, the officer Jaga had assaulted stepped forward, his knuckles white as he gripped his chain necklace. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he spoke. "We also deeply feel responsibility on our side, and will severely discipline both soldiers." His eyes, burning with a cold fire, locked onto Gate and Jaga, and he spat out a single name, sealing his vow of retribution, Jaga. Before the situation could escalate further, a booming voice cut through the tension. Moai, a giant and a staff sergeant of the Special Third Company, glared down at the squabbling soldiers. "Shut up, you scoundrels," he roared, his patience worn thin by their bickering. "What did you do right to open your mouths, you wretches?" A harpian with sharp, discerning eyes and feathered wings stepped forward. It was Rebecca, the Special Third Company commander. Her voice was calm but held an unmistakable edge of authority. "You too. I thought well of you. The company commander is disappointed in you," she stated, her gaze fixed on Gate and Morris. "If you did wrong, admit your mistake and beg that you won't do it again. Just reflect and do well from now on." Morris opened his mouth to protest, his youthful indignation flaring, but Gate placed a firm hand on his shoulder, silencing him. Stepping forward, Gate met the commander's gaze without hesitation. "I'm sorry. Morris is still adapting," he said, before taking full responsibility. "Correct. I gave the order. I was reckless." His confession was immediate and absolute, a calculated move to protect the new recruit. Commander Rebecca's expression softened slightly, a flicker of approval in her eyes. "Right, just admit it coolly like Gate. How much better does that look?" she said, turning her attention back to the defiant Morris. "I'm not scolding you for doing wrong. I'm scolding you because you won't admit your mistake." The officer from the other unit remained unconvinced. "Even if our side admits the act, we can't just let this pass, given the severity of the matter." Rebecca cut him off, her tone turning sharp. "Excuse me, wait a moment," she interjected. "We won't let it pass. We'll make them run laps in full gear. But you know they're Transcendents, right?" The question was a pointed reminder of their status and a warning against excessive punishment. The officer stammered, caught off guard. Rebecca pressed her advantage, her voice laced with thinly veiled threats. "Why is someone who should know better being so rigid? What is this military intelligence?" she scoffed, before leaning in closer. "I didn't want to say this, but what's your officer rank?" "For 8571. Care to have a problem? Your brigade commander lives in Namchimbong, right? I was at the sauna yesterday. Let's keep this pleasant." "Okay." The officer, thoroughly intimidated, could only stammer his agreement. Rebecca turned to leave, her final order hanging in the air. "Then I'll be going, but you must give appropriate punishment for the wrongdoing internally and report the details to me." As she and the other officers departed, Moai sighed in relief. "Still, today was resolved without major issues," he mumbled. "All thanks to the company commander stepping up." Just as Moai began to relax, Rebecca's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. She had stopped and turned, her eyes narrowed. "Laughing?" she asked, her tone icy. An unspoken command passed between them, and Moai's brief moment of levity vanished. As she sat at her desk, she gave her order without looking up. "See me separately later." Moai could only gulp and agree. The internal punishment was delivered swiftly. Jaga smirked as he handed Gate the disciplinary decision record. "You two are lucky," he sneered. The document sentenced mid-rank Gate and low-rank Morris to 7 days of full gear running, 10 laps around the parade ground. Morris stared at the paper, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is absurd," mid-rank Gate. Gate simply looked ahead, his expression unreadable. "It's common. Adapt to it." 5 weeks flew by in a grueling montage of training. Recruits handed over magic devices, crawled under barbed wire, and practiced their incantations amidst the pouring rain. Among them was a new face, a silver-haired dark elf. Week 5, Dark Mage trainee Swan had arrived and was settling into the harsh military life. Swan diligently polished her combat boots until the leather shone, feeling a sense of boredom creep in. After roughly adapting to the atmosphere, "It's so boring I wonder if this is really right," she mused. Her comrades chattered nearby about the desired assignment interviews, a privilege reserved for top scorers like Swan and a trainee named Xania. It seemed a fragile camaraderie had formed among the recruits. But as Swan lay in her bunk at night, one thing grated on her nerves, something she could never adapt to. The thunderous, slobbering snores of Narts, the very same lout she had once tried to help. Goodwill becomes disaster, she thought with bitter resentment, the sound drilling into her skull. "I should have just let him perish back then." The next day, an officer posted the mid-evaluation records, sending the trainees scrambling to check their scores. Swan pushed through the crowd, her eyes scanning the list, only to freeze in utter shock. There, in 3rd place, just below herself and Xania, was the name, Narts Windsor von Becken. "Narts?" she thought, incredulous. "Why does that reject have such high scores? What has he even done?" Swan's gaze drifted across the room and landed on the source of the injustice. The female officer who had demanded Jaga's punishment was now fawning over Narts, complimenting his ill-fitting armor. The truth struck Swan with sickening clarity. So this brute is the culprit, she seethed internally. He's trying not to make it obvious he's cozying up to that swine, but it's so painfully obvious. A truly disturbing thought crossed Swan's mind as she watched the display. Is he planning to push the guy until he becomes a Transcendent? The idea was so preposterous, so contrary to all merit and logic, that she couldn't fully believe it. That can't happen, right? Back in the regular soldier barracks, Morris held the scorecard, his face a mask of confusion. Isn't this a problem? Why is the scorecard like this? He asked Gate. Gate didn't even turn from his task. Why? Because that wretch Jaga stuffed the highest points for him in every category. But he's already failed the Deca weapon extraction, so do scores even matter? Morris pressed. Gate finally looked at him, his expression grim. Here, in the Central Brigade, scores are important to stay, he explained. The formal pretense of service is the only way to fill the vanity crushed by extraction failure. Morris and another soldier discussed the horrifying prospect of the torture officer remaining in their unit. If he's a dark elf, he'll go as high-rank Uldring's assistant. Will high-rank Uldring stay quiet? The soldier wondered aloud. Morris glanced at Gate. And isn't mid-rank Gate angered? Gate's reply was chillingly detached. If you don't expect anything from humans, there's nothing to be angry about. Morris could only look on, thinking that Jaga's behavior was too disgusting to even look at. Nart's voice, loud and demanding, echoed through the barracks. I'm thirsty. Is there any Evian holy water? The female officer immediately barked an order. Who's on water duty? Trainee number 29, Xania. Trainee number 7, Swan. Get water. Swan and Xania struggled together, hauling an enormous, heavy water jar down a long corridor. Darn it. Why is the empty jar so heavy? Swan complained. They should make the giants with energy to spare do this stuff. Exhausted, they set the jar down for a moment's rest, finding themselves in a hall lined with the portraits of war heroes. Xania looked on with reverence, but Swan couldn't resist a cynical remark. Wow, look at this guy's face, she snickered, pointing at the stern portrait of a dark elf general. Isn't he the ugliest looking among the 6th Front generals? He has to look that bad to make the demons run away. Xania stammered for a moment before quietly stating, That's my dad. Swan's blood ran cold. She began backpedaling at lightning speed, a forced, trembling smile plastered on her face. Looking again, he's handsomely masculine. Sharp eyes too. Physiognomically, he has an excellent skull, she stammered. Trying to change the subject, she asked, But if your dad's a 3-star general, why'd you come here? Xania's answer was earnest and simple. As a soldier's child, it's natural to dedicate myself to the country. Swan felt her world tilting. A 3rd-generation tycoon and now the daughter of a war hero. This place was full of invasive species. She watched Xania, utterly baffled by her simple mind. I'm so complicated, but I don't know what that guy's even thinking, Swan mused. As it turned out, Xania's mind was preoccupied with a single, profound question. Which part of the communal mug was safest to drink from? Swan sighed. Xania wasn't thinking at all. While pumping water from a well, Xania asked Swan about her desired assignment consultation. Well, obviously I'll attempt extraction, and if I fail, I'll stay with the Central Brigade. You? Swan asked. Xania planned to do the same, but would join her father's unit if she failed. Then, a curious thought occurred to Xania. Since you're second place, wasn't your consultation next? They called Nart's first. Swan shrugged. Guess there's some issue. Inside the consultation tent, the officers stared at Nart's selection form in disbelief. As trainee number 13 with a high score, it's correct that he gets selection rights. But, are you serious about this? The administrative elf asked. This isn't like exchanging clothes sizes. Once you stamp it, you absolutely can't change it. Nartz simply grinned, a smug confidence radiating from him. Yes, I decided after much deliberation. Meanwhile, Jaga lounged in the barracks, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. He assumed Nartz would choose the obvious paths, either retrying extraction or joining the Central Brigade as a specialist. In either case, he'd fall under Uldring's command, a situation Jaga could exploit. But Nart's voice echoed from the tent, delivering a statement that no one saw coming. I will remain here in the Interspecies Federation Central Brigade. and apply for the night position. The room fell into a stunned silence. The officers stared, their minds reeling. Jaega, whose official position was high-rank knight, felt the world drop from beneath him. His smug smirk evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. "What?" he mouthed, sweat beading on his brow. While everyone else was horrified, Staff Sergeant Moai slapped Nartz heartily on the back, a broad grin on his face. "Cross-assignment? That's an excellent choice," he boomed. "Sometimes one's innate species and personal aptitude differ. You made a courageous choice." The female officer, however, looked as if she was about to faint. Hidden in the shadows, Morris watched the bizarre scene unfold, whispering to the man beside him. "Gate, what in the world is this?" Morris looked over, his eyes widening in shock. Gate wasn't confused. He was smiling, a slow, predatory grin that spoke of a perfectly executed plan. Later, as they marched into the night, Morris was still trying to process what happened. "Trainee number 13 will go to Barracks 3. What does this mean?" Gate's voice was a low whisper in the dark. "Watch and you'll find out," he said, before laying out the intricate web he had woven. That brute Jaega. As always, he probably made back-channel contact with number 13's parents and received additional bribes, and shoved it so deep down his throat he can't spit it out. Gate continued his explanation, his voice laced with cold satisfaction. He bragged to the officers with his own mouth that he's A-grade, so he absolutely can't back out now. That number 13 is pathologically starved for attention. When such a guy's dream of becoming a Transcendent is crushed, he'll go to the only person who gave him any attention. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Gates' plan hadn't required force or elaborate commands. Doesn't need much. Just a single breeze is enough, he mused. He recalled their punishment run, the simple, calculated words he had planted in Nartz's mind. "You're a cool tone, so the night uniform will suit you." Morris's eyes went wide with dawning realization. This was what Gate had meant during the run. This entire, elaborate scheme was about one thing: dumping the rejected torture officer directly onto his corrupt sponsor. Since Nartz was a dark elf, he would be classified as a dark knight, falling squarely under the command of high-rank Knight Jaega. In other words, this was never about justice. This was Project Jaega's babysitting. Gate's cruel, triumphant smirk confirmed it all. A few minutes earlier, inside a command tent, the dark elf Uldring reviewed a trainee's file. The name read number 13, Nartz. Uldring's brow furrowed in disbelief. He couldn't fathom how someone like Nartz could possibly be an honor student. As he pondered this inconsistency, the shadow of a cocky, armor-clad man loomed in his memory, the smug high-rank knight, Jaega. In that moment, the ominous pieces of the puzzle began to click into place in Uldring's mind. He envisioned the lazy, arrogant Jaega, now paired with the troublesome Nartz. The horrifying reality crashed down on him. Jaega had been saddled with the problematic trainee, and Uldring, as his junior, would be dragged into the chaos. A cold dread filled him as his eyes widened in sheer panic. "I am done for." Uldring whirled around to confront his smirking senior. "Oh, come on. Senior Jaega," he cried out in protest. Jaega simply put a finger to his lips, silencing him with a condescending shoo. His voice dripped with false authority as he said, "Ever heard of accepting results and obeying orders?" With a venomous whisper, Uldring shot back, "What? You don't trust yourself to train a junior properly?" The verbal jab did nothing to change the situation. Uldring was left trembling with suppressed fury, his face a mask of bitter resentment. Seriously, he seethed internally, his mind reeling from the disastrous turn of events. Am I really getting stuck with him like this? For real. The injustice of it all was a poison flooding his veins. Back in the present, Nartz stood before the officers, his hand thumping the table with conviction. "I will remain here at the Central Academy of the Heterogeneous Federation," he declared, his voice filled with newfound purpose, "and apply for the knight posting." He envisioned himself in gleaming armor, a heroic figure, completely oblivious to the political turmoil he had just ignited. The declaration hung in the air, met with starkly different reactions. Jaega, the third company's senior knight, stared in utter disbelief, his face a perfect picture of horrified shock. In stark contrast, Uldring, the third company's senior black mage, burst into a wide, malicious grin, barely containing his triumphant laughter. A senior officer with an eye patch spoke up, impressed. That's quite a bold move. The approval went through immediately, too. Uldring seized the opportunity, his voice dripping with saccharine praise. Exactly. Isn't this a great precedent? He held up Nart's falsified file, gloating as he spun a tale of Jaga's supposed virtue. Senior Jaga is treating trainee Narts without prejudice, strongly arguing that the rigid barriers between races and postings should be brought down. Maybe the higher-ups really valued his sincerity. The eye-patch-wearing officer stroked his beard, seemingly convinced. In the end, true sincerity gets through. Jaga, seeing his fate being sealed, tried to interject, "Sir, still, making this kind of choice so hastily is." But Uldring cut him off, his smile turning predatory. Why the sudden change of tone? Surely you didn't take a bribe or fudge his scores. He leaned in close, his eyes glowing with menace, and whispered a chilling reminder. Accept the result, obey the chain of command. That insufferable Uldring. Jago was rendered speechless, seething with a fury he could not unleash in front of the officers and the blissfully ignorant Narts. He was trapped, cornered by a web of lies he couldn't disprove without implicating himself. And through it all, he had absolutely no idea that the true architect of his misery, Gate, was watching from a distance, his expression cold and unreadable. Gate's mind was already moving to the next phase of his plan. Don't think it's over, he thought, a grim satisfaction settling in his heart. There's still one more move left. Beside him, Morris stared at his superior, a shiver running down his spine. The sheer, calculated cruelty of Gate's scheme was terrifying. Maybe, the young elf thought, the real demon is Intermediate Officer Gate. Later that night, under a canopy of stars, the trainees began their final, grueling exercise. A small, wild creature watched curiously from the forest edge as commands echoed through the dark. Front row, take a half step forward. Close ranks left and right. The soldiers moved as one, their forms silhouetted against the trees, their march a testament to their long and arduous training. Amidst the exhausting march, one of the dark elf trainees spotted a peculiar, spiky object on the ground. That's an unusual pebble, he mused, stooping to pick it up and stow it away. Got myself a souvenir. His weary companion shot him an exasperated look, muttering, "This punk keeps picking stuff up." The column of exhausted soldiers pressed on, a carriage bearing a medical banner keeping pace. Gates' voice cut through their fatigue, a relentless motivator. "Once we get over that ridge, we're done," he shouted. "Just keep your eyes on the pack of the person in front of you. Start thinking, and your legs will give out." A unified cry of "Yes, sir," answered him from the darkness. The female elf trainee struggled, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the heavy log on her back feeling like a mountain. "Once this is over, all training is done," she told herself, forcing her legs to move. "Just go. Just walk." To bolster their spirits, Gate ordered them to sing. Marching song is "We Go to the Front Lines." Soon, their weary voices rose in unison, filling the silent mountains with their song. With the full-gear march concluded, the exhausted but triumphant trainees finally returned to the fortress, their voices cheering, "We're home." An officer made the final mark on a roster. The grueling 6-week basic training program at the Federation Intake Battalion had officially come to an end. Now, under a new dawn, the final and most important event was set to begin, the Deca weapon drawing ceremony. An announcer's voice boomed across the training ground. "We will now commence the third drawing ceremony. Salute the Federation flag." Upon a raised dais, a winged commander stood, flanked by an honor guard, addressing the massive formation of trainees. As the battalion commander began to speak, Morris turned to Gate. "Third time? Does the count reset from you, sir?" Gate answered calmly, his gaze fixed on the stage. "If you include all the failed attempts, it's been over 100 times. But if the scripture's prophecy is right, this should neatly end on the 10th round." The commander's voice carried over the crowd. You've all worked hard for a long time. Everything was for the sake of this noble tradition. The commander's gaze swept over the Black Mage trainees, their faces a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. From this moment, she declared, the heterogeneous Federation Intake Battalion's Black Mage trainees will begin the final drawing ceremony. Gate stepped forward, his voice ringing out with authority. Trainees whose names are called, step forward. This class has 2 candidates. Trainee number 29, Xenia, trainee number 7, Swan. At the call of their names, the 2 candidates stepped out from the ranks. Xenia, a powerfully built dark elf, and Swan, a slender, silver-haired elf, walked towards the center of the arena. As they prepared, their latent magical energy flared to life, a visible aura of purple power enveloping them. The commander announced the order of attempts. Second and final scores. Trainee Xenia will attempt first. Drawl Xenia turned to her rival, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. Swan, I'm sorry, but the one who draws the Deco weapon and becomes a Transcendent will be me. Xenia's focus narrowed on the staff embedded in the rock, its red orb pulsing with ancient power. This was the legendary Deco weapon, said to be immovable by ordinary means. But, she thought, her muscles coiling with power. Before overwhelming muscle, legends mean nothing. The onlookers gasped. The elf archer's jaw dropped in shock. What the, isn't she in the women's corps? Her muscle mass and definition are basically ogre level. Gates smirked, explaining, she's planning to ignore the legend and yank it out with brute strength. Swan watched, stunned, seeing a brief vision of Xenia's equally massive family, and wondered, is it genetics? A crimson aura exploded around Xenia as she channeled all of her strength. Adopting a wide stance, she gripped the weapon in a sumo deadlift. With a ferocious roar of "Father," she heaved with all her might. For a tense moment, she strained against the immovable object, and then, nothing. She slumped in defeat, asking sheepishly, do you have a pickaxe or a shovel by any chance? With Xenia's spectacular failure, all eyes turned to the next and final candidate. Next, trainee number 7, Swan. With a quiet resolve, Swan walked forward, his expression a mask of calm focus. The hopes of his entire class and the weight of prophecy rested on his shoulders. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Swan was the top of their class in training scores. The commander raised her hand, her voice echoing with ancient power. In the name of the scripture, I command you. The qualified one shall draw forth the weapon of Transcendence. Drawl Swan stood before the weapon, the red orb seeming to pulse in time with his own heartbeat, and took a firm grip. Morris swallowed hard, watching with rapt attention. Swan focused his will, his knuckles white as he pulled. I'll draw it. I draw it, he vowed internally. But as he strained, he felt an unyielding resistance. What? His eyes shot open in disbelief. What on earth? Why isn't it budging at all? A wave of disappointment washed over the other trainees. So after Eagle Eye, even Swan can't pull it. One whispered, is this the first time the scripture has been wrong? Swan's composure finally broke, sweat beading on his brow as despair set in. I was sure, he thought, his confidence crumbling. Did I miscalculate? A memory surfaced, his past self, ostracized for his intense, off-putting demeanor. He had always been alone, focused only on this single goal. As he thought, yeah, giving up is the yes. He tried to release his grip, but stopped. A sudden panic seized him as he realized the truth. What is this? Why won't my hand let go? Suddenly, a malevolent, crimson energy erupted from the Deco weapon, swirling around Swan in a violent vortex. His eyes went wide with shock as his consciousness was pulled into an otherworldly plane. To the onlookers, he had simply gone rigid, standing motionless before the weapon. What the? Someone murmured. Why is he just standing there? This is kind of scary. Gates' eyes widened, recognizing the phenomenon. Morris followed his gaze, his own expression turning to one of awe and fear. That kid, Gate breathed, has met the Crimson Cloud Spirit. Before Swan, The crimson energy coalesced into a monstrous, swirling face with hollow eyes. An ancient voice filled his mind. "You are murky." The spirit showed him a vision of a regal, powerful sorcerer, its previous master. Unlike this one's previous master, the spirit intoned, its voice a low rumble. "You are murky even without a single strand of ambition." The spirit delved deep into Swan's mind, exposing his most private, mundane secrets. Despite your keen intellect and great capability, you burned hundreds of hours on weekday nights reading mass-produced romance novels like The Remarried Princess. It continued its relentless critique. You spent your weekends ditching drunk customers, wasting time alone in the arcade, then sobering up with hangover soup like a zombie. Repeating that and wasting a long life. Horrified, Swan shrieked, "No. Why are you talking like that with some century-long phase when I wasn't even 100 yet?" Swan hung his head, defeated. "So what you're saying is, I'm unfit." "Fine." To his utter shock, the spirit seemed pleased. "I grant you pitch black dew. You're far more to my liking than that smelly pig or that burdensome eagle eye." The Crimson Cloud spirit explained its reasoning. The black magic deca weapon pitch black dew has the property of corrupting its user. But someone like you, whose greatest ambition is to lie at home reading novels, is someone I can trust with it. A sinister grin spread across the spirit's face. "From this moment on, pitch black dew is yours." Back in the physical world, the crimson energy subsided. Swan stood, holding the legendary weapon, now freed from the stone. He nodded respectfully. "I am grateful that the noble Crimson Cloud spirit trusts me, but..." He suddenly raised the staff high, his voice filled with righteous indignation, and screamed at the heavens. "The Remarried Princess is not a mass-produced romance novel. It's literature." The entire assembly stood in stunned silence, completely baffled by his passionate, literary outburst. Gate, Morris, the commander, everyone stared, dumbfounded. Swan himself seemed to snap out of it, a look of dawning horror on his face at what he'd just shouted. Then, inexplicably, a few of his fellow trainees began to clap, the sound slowly spreading through the astonished crowd. And so, ironically, Swan succeeded where all others had failed. Precisely because his vessel, his worldly ambition, was so small and unassuming compared to his vast potential, he was deemed worthy. Staring at the legendary weapon in his hands, he could only think, "I drew it." And with that, Swan, Black Mage, was officially confirmed as a Transcendent, the new wielder of the deca weapon, Pitch Black Dew. However, the emergence of a new Transcendent deeply scratched at the pride of certain individuals. From a ridge overlooking the ceremony, a group of imposing female warriors watched. One scoffed, "Making such a fuss over that trivial matter, seriously, those insolent brats." Her voice was laced with envy as she added, "If you're going to take triple the pay without even having the seniority, you'd better be ready to take triple the curses too, right?" In stark contrast, Xenia watched from the crowd, tears welling in her eyes. A wide, genuine smile broke across her face as she clapped her hands together in a gesture of respect. "Wah-dash, that brat," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "If it's you, Swan, I acknowledge you." Suddenly, Xenia's expression shifted from joy to alarm. Her eyes snapped towards a distant mountain peak as a wave of chilling energy washed over the area. "Huh, just now," she whispered, her heightened senses screaming a warning. "I felt an extremely ominous aura." The sky above the mountain twisted, and a palpable malevolence began to seep out from the darkness. In a chaotic, nightmarish vision, the source of the aura was revealed. Deep within a corrupted forest, twisted, demonic entities stirred from their slumber. With jagged claws, horned visages, and a hunger for destruction, a legion of darkness was awakening, its sights set upon the unsuspecting world. The recruit graduation ceremony concluded under a sky of somber gray clouds. Among the newly minted soldiers stood Swan, a mix of pride and melancholy washing over her. The grueling training was finally over, a milestone achieved, yet the finality of it left a strange void. This was not an end, she knew. but the very first step into a much larger, more dangerous world. A heavy hand suddenly clapped on his Swan's shoulder, startling her from her thoughts. It was Uldring, a fellow graduate, his face uncharacteristically serious. He confessed that he'd held back troubling news to avoid ruining the ceremony. With a grave tone, he revealed a terrifying sight. He had witnessed demons gathering at a distant mountain peak, an omen that chilled Swan to the bone. Uldring pressed a strange object into Swan's hand. It was a bronze, spiky sphere with a disturbing, organic feel. He explained that since Gate was now Swan's direct senior, she was to deliver it to him. Baffled by the bizarre item, which he called an ominous sign, Swan could only stare at it, wondering what it could possibly be, before agreeing to the strange request. Suddenly, Uldring's stoic demeanor shattered. He pulled Swan into a tight, desperate embrace, thanking her for their time together over the past 6 weeks. Caught off guard by the display of emotion, Swan stammered that she was glad to be his comrade too. With a final, heartfelt wave and a whispered adios, Uldring turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving Swan standing alone and bewildered. All around, similar scenes of emotional farewells played out. Even the 2 recruits who had fought on the first day shared a tearful, awkward hug. As the graduates boarded carriages to be taken to their new posts, Swan watched with a heavy heart. Farewell, everyone, she thought, a profound sense of loneliness setting in. I'm never seeing any of you again. Observing the departing recruits, the elven archer Xenia commented to Gate that the new generation seemed soft, already dreaming of their 100-day leave. Nearby, Morris boasted loudly about the civilian food he planned to eat, completely missing the somber mood. Gate shot him a withering glare, his patience wearing thin with the soldier's utter lack of tact. Later, in the privacy of her new quarters, Swan adjusted her new, stiff uniform. It was a size too small, feeling tight across her chest, a minor but immediate discomfort in her new life. She picked up her staff, a powerful artifact known as the Pitch Black Pavilion, her gaze hardening with resolve. From now on, she vowed to the weapon, "You and I are one body until death." Stepping out of her tent, Swan was met by a diminutive senior soldier. He handed her a hefty, leather-bound volume titled Recruit's Notebook. The guide was filled with everything a new soldier needed to know: seniors' batch numbers, cleaning rotations, reporting procedures, and a seemingly endless list of rules, overwhelming Swan with its sheer volume. Her senior stressed the importance of the book, particularly the daily password. He warned that advanced soldier Jera was notoriously strict and that, as a Transcendent, Swan would be under extra scrutiny. With a final instruction to memorize the day's code, chivalry, and cigarette, and to keep her communication device on her, he departed, leaving her to her studies. Swan opened the book, her eyes scanning the complex script and diagrams within. A confident smirk touched her lips as she thought, "Memorization happens to be my specialty." Her focus was suddenly broken by a sharp, rhythmic sound coming from just outside her tent, pulling her attention away from the pages. Peeking through the tent flap, she saw Gate, his muscles taut as he trained relentlessly. He raised his greatsword high and brought it down in a devastating arc, executing the rock-splitting slash with immense power. Swan watched with a critical gaze, inwardly questioning if such a simple, crude-looking technique could truly be effective in the chaos of a real battle. As she watched Gate train, a jolt of memory shot through her. Right this, she exclaimed, her eyes widening in alarm. She had completely forgotten about the strange, spiky orb Uldring had entrusted to her. She fumbled for the object, a sense of urgency dawning on her. Meanwhile, Uldring was practically dancing through the camp, his heart soaring with wicked delight. Having found Swan, a smart and capable junior, he gleefully plotted to unload all his tedious duties onto her. He pranced past the 3rd barracks, taunting a struggling peer, and sang a cheerful tune, utterly convinced his military life was now perfect. His joyful reverie came to a screeching halt. A sharp hay cut through the air, and he turned to find himself facing 2 formidable figures: Jera, an elf healer known as Western Snake Eyes, and Asen, a giant warrior called Southern Muscle Brain. Aldring's gleeful expression instantly melted into one of pure, unadulterated fear. Jera greeted him with a deceptively sweet smile, asking why he looked so happy. Asen, however, was blunt, her voice a low growl of resentment that a low-seniority soldier like him had received a junior before they had. Jera's request was simple and chilling. Bring the new Transcendent recruit to the entertainment hall. Aldring's protest that the recruit was still in her protection period was met with cold silence. The mood turned venomous. Asen clenched her fist, her voice dripping with menace as she questioned Aldring's place in the hierarchy. Terrified of the looming violence, Aldring immediately capitulated, promising to fetch the recruit at once. He scurried away, his earlier joy replaced by a bitter, self-pitying misery. Aldring found Swan in her tent and ordered her out. He nonchalantly offered her a Biakma smoke, a common vice among soldiers. Swan, ever proper, replied she would only if ordered, prompting him to warn her against picking up the habit. "I won't, you moron," she replied, her voice low enough for him not to hear, her expression one of cold disdain. Aldring explained the summons, clarifying the brutal reality of military seniority. Though he was an advanced soldier, his later batch number meant he was powerless before Jera and Asen. He gave a grim warning. While male seniors might just give her a hard time, the females would twist you up and burn you down. His only advice was for her to go and grovel. Elsewhere, Gate was in the archives when his aide, Morris, finally delivered the ominous object. Morris explained that a trainee had found it on the march and asked him to pass it along. A sense of dread washed over Gate as he cross-referenced the object with the demon bestiary. His blood ran cold as he found a match. Wiggle Eye, the molted skin of a demon's eye from Annihilation Zone 9. The ancient text described a past military operation where humanity launched a preemptive strike on the demon realm, sparked by the discovery of a similar Wiggle Eye. The records were clear. The attack was launched, the eye turned completely purple. This one, however, was already a deep, malevolent violet, a sign that the demon's reconnaissance was complete and its evolution for invasion was finished. A single, horrified thought consumed Gate. We're screwed. Pinnock seized Gate. He barked orders at Morris to prepare for immediate battle and demanded to know the duty officer's location. Morris nervously reported that Staff Sergeant Moai was likely napping in the barracks. Cursing the chain of command's incompetence, Gate bolted from the archives, his mind racing. The duty officer was absent, and the elite soldiers were all on leave. The grim realization hit Gate. The highest-ranking soldiers currently on base were Jera and Asen. He sprinted towards the entertainment hall, a place notorious for hazing, just as Swan came face-to-face with her tormentors. Jera began the hazing with a condescending question, asking if Swan knew who they were. To her and Asen's astonishment, Swan calmly recited their full names, ranks, batch year, and even a summary of their shared history, all memorized from the recruit notebook. Jera's smug expression faltered, shocked that a soldier who had transferred only today could be so thoroughly prepared. Swan snapped to perfect attention, flawlessly reporting her transfer orders and rattling off the day's complex password without a hint of hesitation. Her impeccable military discipline left the two bullies momentarily stunned. Their plan to intimidate the new recruit had been utterly dismantled by sheer competence. Frustrated, Asen resorted to petty physical harassment, grabbing Swan's hair and criticizing her appearance. Jera chimed in, insulting Swan's intelligence and uniform. They were grasping at straws, desperately trying to find any fault to justify their abuse of power and reassert their dominance over the unshakable novice. At that moment, Gate burst through the door, holding the Wiggle Eye aloft like a grim trophy. He shouted their names, trying to convey the urgency of the situation, that the artifact would be fully active by nightfall, and this was their only chance to act. He frantically tried to explain what was written in the bestiary. Enraged by the interruption of her education session, Asen swung without warning, striking Gate hard across the face. She seethed at his audacity. Jera, maintaining a veneer of calm, gestured for him to continue, her voice laced with mockery as she asked him to explain the urgent matter. Gape pleaded with them, his voice strained, trying to make them understand the apocalyptic threat the purple wiggle eye represented. His words were met with giggles and derision. Jera dismissed his panic as a clumsy attempt to get her attention, while Asen sneered at the pathetic display. Having witnessed enough, Swan's patience snapped. "You're actually quite the nuisance, aren't you?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt for Jera. Before anyone could react, Asen delivered a brutal kick to Gate's side, launching him out of the building. She then callously ordered the prince to go clean the barracks, dismissing the world-ending threat with a wave of her hand. Gate crashed to the ground outside, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows. He seethed with a powerless fury. From the officers sleeping on duty to these arrogant, incompetent advanced soldiers, no one would listen. He clutched the wiggle eye, its violet hue deepening in the twilight. There was no time left. High on the castle wall, two guards fought off the crushing boredom of their post. With 40 minutes left in their shift, one suggested telling scary stories to pass the time. His partner agreed, pondering a tale chilling enough to break the monotony of the long night. The storyteller began, his voice trembling theatrically as he pointed behind his friend. "It's behind you." His companion erupted in laughter at the cliché, terrible acting. Unseen by the laughing guard, a monstrous, horned demon with slobbering jaws materialized from the shadows, its terrifying form real and immediate. As the guards remained oblivious, the wiggle eye pulsed with a final, dark energy. Its central pupil stared out into the void, a beacon of darkness. The reconnaissance was over. The evolution was complete. The invasion had begun. The guard's attempt at humor fell flat. His companion burst out laughing, not at the tired old joke, but at the sheer absurdity of his friend's terrible acting. "Your delivery is ridiculous," he wheezed, oblivious to the monstrous form materializing from the shadows behind him. A grotesque, horned demon, its fanged maw dripping with saliva, had made the guard's joke a horrifying reality. A century of conflict had ended, giving way to an uneasy ceasefire. Over time, the bloodstains on the fields of battle faded, and the swords of fallen warriors were laid to rest, reclaimed by nature. A fragile peace settled over the land, but the memory of war and the resolve it forged began to wither like the flowers growing over old graves. In the decades of peace, the Federation's military had forgotten the solemn oath it swore on the day of reversal. Complacency had set in, rotting the army from the inside out. Soldiers and officers alike drowned their vigilance in ale, and the duty rosters were filled with no-shows and deserters. It was in this state of decay that the unthinkable happened. The Black Bar, the final boundary between the demon race and the Federation, was breached by a lone wargle. This incursion was not a surprise to the cosmos, but an inevitability. The Federation's weakness was a scent on the wind, a dinner bell for the hungry dark. The slow decay of their military might was a quiet invitation, and now, the first guest had arrived to feast. Suddenly, the mournful cry of a war horn shattered the night's tranquility. A scout, his face pale with terror, scrambled to his feet, his voice cracking as he screamed the alarm. "It's the demon race." The words echoed across the ramparts, a death knell for the long, forgotten peace. Panic erupted on the walls. The soldiers, startled from their boredom, stared in disbelief as the foul stench of the demon washed over them. How did they break through the Black Bar? One choked out. Then, it appeared, a monstrous silhouette against the full moon, a wargle of terrifying size, and the men drew their blades, their hands trembling. The sight of a true demon was a visceral assault on the senses. For those who had never faced such a creature, the sheer pressure of its malevolent aura was overwhelming. The air grew thick with despair, and the stomachs of the inexperienced guards churned, forcing them to retch in utter terror. This creature was a wargle, a high-tier entity among the lower demon species, but its power was far beyond what these soldiers could comprehend. It lunged forward, its killing intent a physical force that crushed their spirits. One soldier, paralyzed by fear, could only stammer, "Don't come closer," his sword feeling like a useless twig in his grasp. With a contemptuous roar, The wargle swatted a soldier aside, as if he were an insect. It landed with a ground-shaking thud, its monstrous form dominating the battlement. The laughing guard, now alone before the beast, could only groan in abject terror, his legs giving way beneath him as he stared into the face of death. But death would wait. A flash of movement, and a new figure soared through the air, silhouetted against the moon. With eyes glowing like embers, Gate descended, his massive great sword held high. He brought the blade down in a devastating arc, a crimson streak of vengeance against the encroaching darkness. The sound of rending flesh and shattering bone echoed as Gate's sword cleaved the warble's skull in two. The demon let out a final, gurgling cry before its massive body collapsed. Gate landed with practiced ease, his back to the bisected monstrosity, the immediate danger neutralized. Gate took a deep, shuddering breath, the adrenaline of combat coursing through him. This was no training exercise, no nightmare. This was a real situation. As the other soldiers stared in shock, one finally found his voice, yelling, "My goodness! It's a real demon." The reality of their predicament had finally sunk in. On another section of the wall, Sierra and her unit of archers swiftly secured their position. "Position secured," she called out, her voice steady. "Support fire is available immediately." Below, the other Transcendents, scattered and disorganized, braced themselves to face the demonic intruder. The trainees were frozen in fear. Morris's eyes were wide with terror, while Swan, the promising mage, was shaking uncontrollably, her staff trembling in her hands. "Hey, why are you shaking so much?" one of her peers asked, his own voice tight with anxiety. The raw pressure of the situation was too much for the untested newcomers. Gate's eyes scanned the chaos, a scowl forming on his face. "Other than Aldring, I don't see any seniors or officers," he muttered. He raised his voice, a commander taking charge. "We're in an emergency state. Act first, report later." Nearby, Aldring was berating a cowering soldier. "Didn't you get trained? Don't just cough. Put on your scarf." As the wargle's corpse oozed a viscous, dark slime onto the stone, Gate's eyes narrowed in recognition. "Swamp," he grunted. His mind raced, pulling up forgotten knowledge from the military guidebooks. He knew this fight was far from over. The guide classified fully molted wargles as extremely dangerous, and not just for their aggression. The true threat was the slime they secreted, a substance called swamp. Once it spread and hardened, it contaminated the soil, transforming the area into demon race territory, an anchor for a larger invasion. Aldring turned his frustration on the still trembling Swan. "Hey, get a grip," he yelled. He thought to himself that in every crisis, a metacognition defective individual appears. His thoughts were interrupted as a panicked knight on horseback blundered into the archer's line of fire, adding to the chaos. Sierra screamed at the knight, "Don't block my view, move." She drew her bow, trying to line up a shot on the demon, but it was too late. The wargle, with impossible speed, swung its massive arm, sending the knight and his mount flying through the air with a sickening impact. Amidst the chaos, Swan was lost in a spiral of self-loathing. She watched as even a common soldier, an idiot, charged bravely towards the monster while she, a transcendent, was paralyzed by fear. "I'm shaking so badly I can't take a single step," she thought, her spirit breaking. "What kind of transcender am I?" Gate, however, remained focused. He recalled the critical piece of intel. If the warble's main body dies before the slime hardens, the swamp decomposes. The strategy was already documented. A cruel, confident smirk spread across his face as he hefted his blade and charged towards the beast. He knew their weakness. Warbles that have only recently finished molting still have soft outer layers, especially the membranes of their joints. That was the key. He launched himself into the air, aiming for a vulnerable spot. "There," he thought, "I'll cut it down in one strike." He brought his sword down with all his might, but a harsh clang of metal on chitin echoed through the courtyard. His blade was deflected. Gate's eyes widened in disbelief. It blocked it. The creature had moved its hardened foreleg to protect its joint at the last possible second. Gate was pushed back, his arms rattling from the impact. This wasn't a calculated, intelligent defense. Protecting the neck was a primal instinct for survival, hardwired into the creature. This demon was tougher, more resilient than the guidebooks had led him to believe. He gritted his teeth, the frustration boiling inside him. If there had been at least one swordsman of senior rank or higher. He seethed. A bitter memory surfaced, advanced swordsman bouts, a deserter, arrogantly ordering Gate to polish his combat boots the night before he vanished. Their absence was being paid for in blood. As Gate prepared for another assault, shadowy tendrils erupted from the ground, wrapping around the Wargul's limbs. It was a binding spell. The other trainees stared in awe, then turned to Uldring. "Senior Uldring, what should we do?" "Hurry, give us orders," they cried, their panic turning to desperate hope. In that moment, the crushing weight of responsibility fell upon Uldring. He was the highest-ranking one on site, the true commander in battle. Shaking off his own fear, he found his voice and bellowed, "Morris, put up a wide-area buff. Everyone else, pour everything you've got in." Indiscriminate bombardment. Galvanized by his command, the trainees sprang into action. Morris unleashed a blessing of the Spirit King, bathing his comrades in a pale blue light. The archers shouted, "Rapid fire," and let loose a storm of arrows. Swan, her fear momentarily forgotten, began to chant, "Bene Dormi," infants, her staff glowing with dark energy. Her spell, Throne of Eternal, fully manifested, encasing the Wargul in a cage of solidified darkness. But the demon's raw power was immense. It strained, and the magical chains began to groan and crack. It's loosening already," Swan cried, second-guessing her choice of a wide-area buff. The others screamed Gate's name, pleading for him to act. But he remained still, his eyes fixed on the struggling demon, his grip tightening on his sword. He was waiting, ignoring their frantic cries. Just a bit, just a little more precise timing. He thought, his focus absolute. With a final, furious roar, the Wargul shattered the magical restraints. Its neck and head were thrown back in its cry of triumph, its throat exposed for a fraction of a second. Gate's eyes flashed. That was the opening. "Now," he roared, a silent command to himself. He exploded forward, a blur of motion. All his power, all his focus, channeled into a single, perfect strike. His sword sang through the air, a crimson arc of light under the moon, and found its mark. The blade sliced clean through the demon's thick neck. The trainees could only watch, mouths agape, as the Wargul's massive torso was launched into the air, separated from its body. It spun through the night sky before crashing back to the stone with a final, wet thud. The courtyard fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Gate stood over the twitching remains, panting heavily. Central Federation Intermediate Swordsman. Transcender. He had single-handedly slain the demon infiltration entity. The system registered the fact with cold finality, kill confirmed. But their victory was fleeting. From the dark mountain peaks that loomed over the fortress, a new sound arose, a terrifying, echoing roar that dwarfed the Wargul's cries. A wave of immense, suffocating pressure washed over the battlefield as countless demonic forms began to stir, their eyes glowing in the darkness. This was not a lone intruder. This was an army. Towering over the lesser demons were the Grotan, a white-bodied demon race whose muscular forms promised untold destruction. The reconnaissance was over. The true invasion had begun. The swamp was not just a weapon, it was a tool of colonization. At the Federation's imposing white spirit fortress, a lone messenger streaked through the night, a blur of motion against the cold stone. Inside, a stern, winged officer named Rebecca was startled from her paperwork by the urgent delivery. Her single eye scanned the document that had suddenly appeared on her desk, a flicker of confusion crossing her features as she absorbed the unexpected message. She recognized the sender's code. "Chidao," she murmured, her brow furrowing. The letter was from Intermediate Soldier Gate, a direct, unauthorized breach of the chain of command. He wrote of a looming, large-scale demon invasion, the absence of senior officers, and enclosed evidence to support his dire claims. As Rebecca's eyes flew across the parchment, her confusion turned to cold dread and then to shocked alarm. Without hesitation, Rebecca burst into the Federation headquarters conference room, announcing an emergency. Inside, the 5 cardinal constellations, the highest-ranking staff, were gathered around a glowing crystal orb. An old, scarred officer with a stern visage turned to her. "Captain Rebecca," he acknowledged, "you came at the perfect time." Rebecca's voice was tight with urgency as she reported the crystal orb anomaly transmission. The orb had been dark throughout the entire ceasefire, leading everyone to believe the ancient communication tower had finally ceased to function. Holding up Gates' letter, she revealed the terrifying truth. "If this is accurate," she stated grimly, "the demon infiltration was anticipated as of yesterday." One of the officers scoffed in disbelief, having long dismissed the Demon Race Guide as a collection of myths. "I thought it was just a book full of delusions," he muttered. But the evidence was undeniable, confirmed by the orb's afterimages which now swirled with visions of the demonic horde. Its usefulness, once questioned, was now terrifyingly apparent. A fierce debate erupted. One officer, his face a mask of grim determination, argued for an immediate, full-force advance, insisting there was no time to delay. However, a more cautious, older officer protested, warning that such an action during an official ceasefire would be a reckless provocation, potentially escalating a situation that might otherwise resolve itself. The first officer slammed his fist on the table, his patience gone. "Provoke them," he spat, his voice laced with contempt. "You don't provoke vermin, you exterminate them. They have already torn through our borders and infiltrated the fortress itself. And you speak of ceasefires? Your foolishness is astounding." A more level-headed officer intervened, attempting to de-escalate the argument. He pointed out that the incursion was in the Grotin bloodland, a region far from the demon's core, and its leader was likely a disposable subordinate. Moving the entire force now would be a massive burden, he proposed. Why not deploy the 3 Transcenders we selected for precisely this kind of infiltration mission? An image of the 3 chosen soldiers, Gate, Nartz, and a young elven child, flashed through their minds. They were the infiltration specialists, their unique skills honed for surgical strikes behind enemy lines. The head officer, the constellation leader, weighed the pragmatic suggestion, his gaze finally settling on the woman who brought the news. "Captain Rebecca," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Any opinions?" Meanwhile, back at the fortress wall, Morris voiced his concern. "Aren't you getting thrown in the brig for skipping the reporting chain?" he asked Gate. Gates' reply was cold and resolute, his gaze fixed on the corrupted landscape ahead. "It's an emergency," he stated flatly, "and I don't trust Corporal Moai anymore." Gate explained the terrifying nature of the Wargul's swamp, a viscous substance that was already creeping across the stone. While their small squad could move through it, he knew the danger it represented. If the swamp secreted by another Wargul spreads and hardens, he warned, it will form a beachhead. It's only a matter of time before the regular demon units swarm in. He laid out their mission with grim clarity. They had to infiltrate the demons, Bloodland, and assassinate the white-bodied Grotin core, the host entity controlling the lesser demons. Eliminate the host, and all the mentally linked entities will perish, he explained, his hand resting on the demon guide. The guide was right. I need to study it more carefully. The young elf, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, looked up at Gate. "What happens next?" he asked. Gate's reply was a single, unwavering word: advance. In that moment, he accepted their reality. The fragile ceasefire was over, and the time for diplomacy had passed. History had taught him there were only 2 choices in war: kill or be killed. Elsewhere, the night's chaos was met with ignorance and exhaustion. A soldier yawned, surveying the damage from the Wargul attack. "What happened all night?" he grumbled. "Why did that monster attack now? Should have just dropped dead, that filthy pig." Spotting a wounded comrade, he apathetically ordered him to be moved to the infirmary. The casual dismissal of the threat was widespread. 2 other soldiers chatted lazily, one complaining about the loud bugle call. They said one demon got in, The other replied with a laugh. The guys freaked out over killing just one thing. Can't even sleep. Nearby, a sharp-eared elf listened, a bitter understanding dawning on her. Reality's hitting hard, she thought, disgusted by their complacency. Suddenly, Corporal Moai stormed onto the scene, his face purple with rage. He berated the soldiers not for their lack of vigilance, but for the mess they'd made and for not reporting to him. "You caused all this chaos without reporting to your superiors?" he bellowed. "Clean it up. Wipe the blood. It stinks, you fools." Watching the absurd scene unfold, a deep unease settled over Gate. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong, a dissonant note in the aftermath of the battle. What could it be, he wondered, a cold feeling coiling in his gut. The reason for this strange uneasiness. The source of the problem was soon clear. In his quarters, Moai was busy writing a falsified report, crediting himself with the Warble's defeat and claiming there were no casualties. He leaned back in his chair with a contented sigh. "It's so comfortable without Rebecca around," he mused. "Not seeing her snake-like face makes this whole thing bearable." Gates' unease solidified into disbelief as he found his squad being punished for the senior soldier's laziness. He watched as Morris and the others were forced to kneel on the cold ground. A senior elf named Jera looked down on them with utter contempt. "You guys," she sneered. "Why did you do that?" The injustice of it all was staggering. Jera's petty tyranny continued as she berated Morris for the damp laundry. She then turned her scorn on the other intermediate, a wood elf, for failing to prepare hot water for the seniors' baths. "Is it because you're a wood elf and your learning ability is low?" she mocked. The young elf could only stammer an apology, his head bowed in humiliation. Gate stepped forward, his voice cold. "Senior Jera, yesterday was an emergency. The situation isn't over." Jera's eyes narrowed, and she grabbed a handful of his hair, yanking his head back. "This one never just says yes," she thought furiously. "You kill one demon, and suddenly you think you're above your station?" She laid out her absurd priorities with chilling clarity. "The seniors need clean clothes and a hot shower. That is far more important than any demon," she declared. "Even if you're about to die, laundry and hot water come first." With a smug smirk, she crossed her arms. In that moment, Gate understood the source of his unease. It was their victory. The lack of casualties had blinded them to the true danger, allowing their petty grievances to fester. "These people are animals who only understand when they see blood," he realized with a chilling clarity. A dark, terrible thought took root in his mind. Maybe I should have let one of them die. Jera saw the raw fury in Gates' eyes and felt a flicker of unease. He's not even hiding it anymore, she thought. But before she could speak, a runner burst onto the scene. "The officer says everyone assemble at the drill ground," he shouted. The command cut through the tension, and the soldiers began to move. The entire unit gathered in the pouring rain. Corporal Moai stood before them, a self-satisfied look on his face as he prepared to deliver his orders. Gate and his small squad stood apart, their faces grim, a stark contrast to the oblivious seniors. "I'll skip reports," Moai announced grandly, and announced the decision. Moai explained that only Transcenders could enter the demon bloodlands, thanks to the special properties of their Red Cloud weapons. Their enchanted blades, called decaphons, produced an energy field that purified the toxic air of the swamps, allowing them to breathe where others could not. It was this unique ability that defined their next mission. His voice boomed with false confidence. "Our proud Transcender troops will be deployed first," he declared. "Just like yesterday, you will kill the host Grotan, then signal with sacred fire. The rest of us will move in for the purification." He presented the mission as a simple repeat of their previous success, ignoring the vastly different scale of the threat. Gate stepped forward, his voice cutting through the rain. "The route is swarming with demons. Without full force support, the three of us can't even reach the Bloodland," he stated, his words a direct challenge. "That order is the same as telling us to go die." Moai's face contorted in rage. "What?" he roared. "Are you questioning a superior's order?" An onlooker watched, impressed. Gate was fearless, speaking truth to power without restraint. He pressed his point. insisting on an immediate full-force advance, but Moai shouted him down with hollow motivational drivel. "Soldier spirit. If you believe you can do it, you can," he yelled, completely dismissing the tactical reality of a suicide mission. Moai delivered his final, insane order. The Transcenders were to clean up the drill ground and then stand by for deployment at dawn. Gates' eyes narrowed, the cold fury returning. He was being sent to his death by an incompetent fool, and every second they wasted cleaning up was another second the demon army grew stronger. "Roll call over, dismissed," Moai bellowed. As the order settled, Gates' mind raced. He knew the fully evolved Wargles would soon cross the border, and time was running out. Just then, a single brown feather drifted down from the stormy sky, landing softly on his shoulder. He looked up, his brow furrowed in confusion, searching the rain-swept clouds for its source. A dark shape descended through the downpour, wings beating against the storm. The figure landed with impossible grace amidst the stunned soldiers. Corporal Moai's jaw dropped as he recognized the newcomer. Gates stared in shock. It was Captain Rebecca. Her presence commanded immediate silence and authority. Behind her, her elite winged guard touched down in perfect, intimidating formation. Moai began to sweat, stammering in disbelief. "See, Captain, how did you return so suddenly?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. Rebecca held up the crumpled, falsified report. "Moai, is this a report?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. Before he could explain, her clawed hand shot out, seizing him by the throat and lifting him into the air. "You wrote a pathetic novel, you fool," she growled, her grip tightening like a vice. Her voice was pure ice. "Did you think that Crystal Tower was just for show?" she hissed. "I don't need a report from you. I can see with my own eyes who fought and who sat back and enjoyed the easy ride. It's painfully obvious." Her gaze swept over Gates' determined squad, a flicker of respect in her eye, before returning to Moai with utter contempt. She dropped the gasping corporal and unfurled an official scroll from headquarters. "All units, attention!" Her voice, amplified by command, boomed across the fortress. "I have returned with an emergency order. This is not a drill." The atmosphere shifted from lax discipline to the razor's edge of war. Today, as of this moment, immediately, Rebecca roared, her eyes blazing with righteous fire. "All Federation enlistment forces, complete full armament, and commence the sortie." The call to battle rang out, and in the faces of Gate and his comrades, fear was replaced by the grim resolve of soldiers marching to war. Deep within the command tent, a grizzled strategist laid out the grim truth of their enemy. The demon race was not a disorganized horde. They were a single entity, bound by a shared consciousness. Every lesser demon, every monstrous foot soldier, was merely a puppet connected to a central, terrifying main brain, incapable of independent thought or action. He pointed to ancient scrolls, pages from the demon bestiary filled with illustrations of past wars. Every historical record and battlefield account confirmed this terrifying fact. The recent demonic incursion was not a random raid. It was a formal declaration, a signal that the long, fragile armistice was over. The Great War had resumed. Around the table, other leaders listened, their faces etched with the weight of this revelation. The truce had been nothing more than a temporary pause, a fleeting breath before the storm. They all understood the gravity of the situation. This was their one and only chance to strike back. To hesitate now would mean certain doom. Under the relentless downpour, a sortie team marched toward the fortress walls. Their winged captain received a grim report. Danger signals were flaring up along the entire perimeter, making reinforcements an impossibility. With a steely gaze, she accepted their fate. This was a race against time, and waiting for help was a luxury they could not afford. Among the ranks, morale was already beginning to fray. Soldiers muttered bitterly about the high-ranking officers, safe and on vacation while they marched to their potential deaths. The de facto ceasefire had granted them a taste of peace, a system of leave and rest that was now being snatched away as abruptly as it was given. Fear was a palpable poison spreading through the soldiers. One warrior turned to his comrade, his voice a low whisper. What is happening? I think we're all in trouble. The other man could only clench his fists, his body trembling uncontrollably from the sheer, overwhelming terror of the unknown. Suddenly, a soldier doubled over, racked by a violent cough. He spat a dark, viscous substance, his eyes wide with horror. "What is this?" he choked out. The horrifying realization dawned on them all as they looked toward the blighted landscape. The swamp, the demon's corrupting, terraforming weapon, had already breached the black bar and was seeping into the Federation zone. An officer shouted a desperate command. "Put on your face scarves." The soldiers quickly complied, trying to shield themselves from the toxic air. The ground beneath their feet began to change, the mud thickening and bubbling into a disgusting purple sludge, a sign that the very land was turning against them. Without warning, the swamp erupted. A monstrous, worm-like creature with a snapping maw, a gizh, shot out from the mire, its jaws clamping onto an unsuspecting soldier. The man let out a terrified shriek as he was dragged beneath the surface, his comrades crying out in horror as they identified the subterranean predator. The winged commander reacted instantly, her voice cutting through the panic. Infantry square. The soldiers, drilled for this moment, snapped into formation. Heavy shields locked together to form a wall, with spear points bristling outwards, as mages in the center began chanting, their hands glowing with protective energy. Another GCH lunged from the swamp, aiming for a gap in the shield wall. But before it could strike, the commander swooped down from above. With a graceful, lightning-fast arc of her blade, she met the beast in midair, her sword slicing cleanly through its fleshy snout. Her voice rang out across the battlefield, a beacon of strategy in the chaos. "If you cut a Giz's nose, it loses direction and becomes helpless," she roared, revealing the creature's critical weakness. "Cut off their noses." Empowered by this new knowledge, the soldiers fought back with renewed purpose, their blades targeting the beast's vulnerable snouts. Just as the demon bestiary described, the injured GIZH became disoriented, spinning uselessly in the mud, their hunt forgotten in a wave of confusion. But the GIZH were merely a diversion. A new, more terrifying threat appeared as two hulking, rock-skinned demons known as Wurgles leaped over the shield wall. The soldiers stared in shock, their brief moment of victory shattered by the arrival of these elite demonic shock troops. The commander's eyes narrowed as she grasped the enemy's cruel strategy. The Wurgles had been lying in ambush, waiting for the perfect moment to infiltrate their lines. The situation was far more dire than she had imagined. They had even less time than she thought. Issuing orders with swift precision, she commanded, "Harpion squad, target the Wurgles on the left." In an instant, her winged warriors descended upon one of the brutish monsters, their blades ready to strike in a coordinated aerial assault. Simultaneously, she ordered the ground troops to focus their fire. Archers, rapid fire on the right Wurgles. A volley of arrows streaked through the rain, peppering the second Wurgle. The shafts bounced harmlessly off its stone-like hide, failing to pierce its formidable armor. While the ranged units were occupied, the main infantry line buckled under the relentless assault of the GIZH. Seizing the opportunity, the unharmed Wurgle charged forward, smashing into the shield wall with devastating force and sending soldiers scattering like broken dolls. In the chaos, a young white-haired elf, a support mage, was thrown to the ground. He looked up just in time to see the Wurgle's massive fist descending upon him, a piercing scream of pure terror escaping his lips as his life flashed before his eyes. At the last possible second, a crimson greatsword slammed down, blocking the Wurgle's devastating blow. Gates stood over the terrified mage, holding the beast back through sheer will. "I'll handle the Wurgle," he yelled. "Inject the ink mist into the hole and catch the GIZH." Snapped out of his panic, the young mage stammered, "Ink? All right, I was about to do that." The other support mage, a silver-haired woman, began to channel her power, incanting a powerful area of effect spell. She muttered in disbelief, "Wow, did that fool Moai really plan to send just 3 kids here?" A massive sphere of purple magic expanded from her, stunning the GIZH and giving the infantry a much-needed reprieve. Meanwhile, Gate faced the Wurgle, his mind a whirlwind of calculation. He observed its movements, recognizing its pattern of countering and blocking ranged attacks. The solution was simple, yet incredibly dangerous. He had to close the distance and strike from point-blank range. With an explosive burst of speed, Gate shot forward, ducking under the Wurgle's wild swing. He pivoted, channeling all his strength into his crimson blade. In a single, flawless blow, he swung his sword in a brutal upward arc, cleanly severing the monster's head from its shoulders. At the same moment, the Harpion squad concluded their own battle. With perfect coordination, two warriors dove in from opposite sides, their swords crossing in a devastating pincer attack that sliced their Wurgle in two. They landed gracefully amidst the carnage, reporting their success to the commander. Gate's squad regrouped, their immediate engagement complete. As they crossed the black bar into demon territory, Swan, the young elf Gate had saved, was lost in a fog of shame. His mind was blank. In the heat of battle, he had frozen, contributing nothing. The feeling of utter uselessness washed over him. Their victory was short-lived. The commander's voice boomed, reminding them of the true mission. Beyond Black Bar is officially demon race territory from now on. We are moving swiftly to the Bloodlands. Everyone focus. The soldiers acknowledged the order, steeling themselves for the next phase. As they advanced, a healer cried out in annoyance, having been struck by a piece of flying debris. She immediately began casting a spell on the tiny cut on her stomach, worried it might leave a scar. A flying Harpion warrior swooped down, shouting, "Hey, heal the combatants. These soldiers are walking on eggshells." The healer, chastised, quickly apologized. On the front lines, a fierce warrior pummeled demons with her bare fists. But when a few slipped past her, she erupted in fury, grabbing a cowering infantryman. "You fools! I told you not to let them reach me," she yelled, her frustration boiling over as the soldier apologized profusely. Surveying the battle from above, the commander made a critical assessment. The army's composition wasn't bad, but the swamp's influence was a constant drain, depleting their mana and lowering their stats. Even on the fringe of its power, the effect was potent. Ultimately, she knew, victory or defeat would be decided by the actions of the Transcendents. A scout's cry cut through the din of battle. 11 o'clock direction, she pointed, her voice filled with a mix of dread and urgency. Bloodlands in sight. Just as their objective came into view, a panicked shout came from the back of the formation. "Rear, demons are swarming in." They had been flanked. The commander wasted no time, issuing a desperate, strategic command. "All blue mages, deploy the world tree." Responding as one, the mages slammed their staffs into the corrupted earth. A brilliant blue light erupted, coalescing into the area defense buff sanctuary of the world tree. Massive, ethereal vines covered in glowing butterflies and leaves sprouted from the ground, weaving themselves into an impenetrable, sacred dome. The demon horde crashed into the luminous barrier, their unnatural forms recoiling as if struck by holy fire. Their guttural roars turned to shrieks of agony as the sanctuary's pure energy burned them, holding the tide of darkness at bay. Inside the tranquil sanctuary, the commander turned to Gate, her expression grave. "The sanctuary square won't hold out for long either. You know that, right?" Gate met her gaze, the grim understanding passing between them. "I am aware," he replied, his voice low and steady. This was their final gamble. "Channel all remaining mana to the Transcendents," the commander roared. "Flood them with heals and buffs." She turned to the chosen three, Gate, Swan, and the small childlike elf. "Transcendents, are you ready?" Their reply was a unified, determined shout. "Yes, we're ready." With the hopes of the entire army on their shoulders, the three Transcendents stepped through the shimmering wall of the sanctuary. They were immediately plunged into the oppressive, suffocating darkness of the Bloodlands. The light of the sanctuary vanished behind them, leaving them blind in the heart of enemy territory. Gate took the lead, activating a special function of his greatsword. Decaphon function, crimson cloud breath. A soft, red light emanated from the blade, pushing back the darkness and revealing the desolate landscape. The Decaphon's defensive function has activated, he stated. This light will also serve as a lantern. Hold it steady and follow me. Swan and the young elf huddled close, their faces pale with fear, but their resolve firm. They nodded in acknowledgement, their trust placed entirely in their leader. Gate looked forward into the gloom, a grim determination settling over him. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this battle was one he must finish on his own. The weight of his mission was immense. He was leading two subordinates who knew nothing of the true danger into the lair of the Baekshebon, the main brain of the demon army. Forcing himself to swallow the fear and despair threatening to consume him, Gate ventured deeper into the darkness. The silence was unnerving. It's quiet. The young elf whispered, "Are there no demons inside the Bloodlands?" Gate paused, his eyes scanning the cavern ahead. "The Bloodlands are the chamber of the Baekshebon host," he explained. "A sensitive space where not even an ant can enter without permission." He stopped walking. They had arrived. From the shadows, a single, malevolent purple eye flared to life. Gate continued his explanation, his voice grim. "So, most hosts are alone. Before them, perched on a throne of rubble, sat a lone demonic figure. It was humanoid, with corded muscles and a reptilian tail, waiting for them in the suffocating silence." The sheer pressure emanating from the creature was staggering. Gate gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. Beside him, the young elf began to cry, his voice trembling as he tried to downplay the threat. Still, it's only slightly bigger than a Wurgle class." His words were a fatal miscalculation. As if responding to the comment, the demon host stirred. Its muscles began to swell and contort, its stone-like flesh expanding at an unnatural rate. The young elf watched in horror as the creature's size doubled before his very eyes, his brave facade crumbling into a scream of abject terror. Now a hulking behemoth, the demon host rose from its throne. With a deafening roar, it lunged forward, raising a colossal, clawed hand to bring down upon the three intruders. The very ground cracked and splintered under the sheer force of its advance. But Gate did not retreat. As his young companions froze in fear, he stood his ground. Planting his feet firmly, he raised his crimson greatsword, meeting the demon's crushing blow with an immovable wall of steel and will. The impact was cataclysmic, sending shockwaves of force and debris flying, yet he held the line. The demon, a Grothin, stared down at the defiant mortal, its single eye glowing with ancient fury. According to the Federation's research, this creature was merely a vessel. The true enemy, the main brain designated the Black Star Dragon, controlled this powerful body from afar. Gate wasn't just fighting a monster. He was fighting the very will of the demon army itself. The sheer pressure emanating from the Grothin was a physical force, pressing down on the young soldiers. Swan, the gifted mage, could only grunt in agony, sweat pouring down his face as every nerve screamed. Beside him, the support mage Morris was reduced to terrified sobs, the sight of the hulking demon shattering his resolve. But Gate, their leader, refused to break. He grit his teeth, golden eyes blazing with feral intensity. "Get it together," he growled to himself, his own fear a distant echo behind a wall of pure will. "If I lose my focus, everyone dies." He stared up at the monster, a Grothin according to Federation intelligence, a terrifying, white-bodied demon whose powerful limbs promised nothing but utter destruction. The Grothin lunged, its movement a blur of impossible speed for a creature its size. Gate met the charge head-on, his crimson greatsword a shield of defiance against the crushing blow. The impact sent a shockwave across the desolate landscape, throwing Swan and Morris from their feet as Gate's arms screamed in protest, barely holding the line. Overwhelmed by the creature's aura, Swan's mind began to unravel. "My whole body is stiff. I feel like vomiting," he thought, the elevated senses of a transcendent becoming a curse. It was a primal, instinctual terror, a submission to survive imprinted on every living thing since the dawn of time, and it was threatening to consume him completely. Seeing his comrade paralyzed by fear, Gate roared, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence. "What are you doing? Get a grip." The Gro then, sensing weakness, swung its massive fist again. Gate, with a grunt of pure exertion, parried the blow, the ground beneath him cracking and splintering from the sheer force of the impact. Rage and frustration boiled within Gate as he was pushed back. "You want me to face that thing with these pathetic lowlifes?" He seethed internally, the commander's arrogant words echoing in his mind. He remembered the briefing, the absurdly simple plan. The proud Transcendent forces would act as a sacrificial vanguard, a disposable first wave against an impossibly strong beast. Gate let out a sharp breath, forcing the anger down. Those brainless fools, he thought, casting aside his obsession with the flawed strategy. Right now, only the enemy mattered. He reasoned that, despite its power, it was simply a higher species of Wurgle. Its patterns couldn't be that different. A new resolve hardened in his eyes. "I'll do it. I can do it." A desperate strategy formed in his mind. Retreat was not an option. He had to advance, to get in close. Don't back off, climb up him, aim for the vitals. Planting his great sword into the rock, Gate used it as a lever, launching himself into the air and directly at the colossal demon. He twisted mid-air, bringing his blade down in a powerful arc aimed at the demon's arm. But the Grothan's reactions were inhumanly fast. It swiped its other arm to intercept, forcing Gate to abort his attack and use the momentum to flip backward, narrowly avoiding the lethal counter. The force of the demon's miss still sent him crashing into a pile of rubble. The power, speed, and timing were all perfect, Gate lamented, coughing as pain flared through his body. And yet, I couldn't even cut through the joint body. Hopelessness began to set in as he stared at his fallen greatsword. How could he possibly win? A memory surfaced, unbidden. A cocky, smiling soldier named Vouts holding up his own massive blade. "How's this look? Cool, right?" Vouts had said with a grin. "Leo from Barracks 3 drew it for me." It was a foolish, mundane memory from a time that felt a lifetime ago. Gate's blood ran cold. Vouts' supply, the supply unit that had supposedly deserted. He hadn't just deserted, had he? The image of Vouts' decorated sword lying among a pile of bleached skulls flashed in Gate's mind, a grim testament to the fate of those who had come before. In truth, to a demon host accustomed to eons of slaughter, these transcendent soldiers, who lacked any real combat experience, were nothing more than toys. They were a momentary distraction, a brief and bloody sport to soothe its long-lasting, cosmic boredom. The Gro then clenched its fist and slammed it into the ground, unleashing a devastating shockwave. The wave of force and rock shrapnel ripped through the air, catching the 2 young mages and sending them tumbling. They collapsed in a heap, coughing blood, their bodies battered and their spirits nearly broken by the impossible disparity in strength. Leaning heavily on his sword, Gate staggered back to his feet, his body a canvas of pain. The Gro then loomed over him, its shadow a promise of death. From the dust and debris, Swan cried out, his voice a strained whisper. "Senior Gate, no." Seeing his leader about to be executed, Swan found a new well of courage. He pushed aside his fear and began to chant, focusing all his remaining will into a single spell. "Ether, quietus," he cried, summoning the throne of eternal sleep. Chains of pure dark magic erupted from the earth, wrapping around the Grothan's limbs in a desperate attempt to restrain it. Just as with swordsmanship, magic requires a high level of concentration. But this spell was cast through a haze of terror, a last-ditch effort from a mind still reeling from primal fear. The magic was unstable, and with a contemptuous flex of its muscles, the Gro then shattered the ethereal chains as if they were made of glass. Cryaf, the demon's roar of fury sent the young mages flying backward. As they looked up at the unrestrained beast, a single, horrifying truth settled in their hearts. This was not an opponent they could win against. This was a force of nature. Ignoring the mages, the Gro then charged Gate again, its arm morphing into a sharpened blade. Gate met the attack, swinging his greatsword with the full intent to cut the monster down. But its hide was too hard. Parrying the blow was all he could manage, and the force drove him to his knees, his bones groaning under the strain. The follow-up strike sent him hurtling through the air. Gate gasped for breath, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. I can't believe the gap is this overwhelming. To have even a sliver of hope, he knew what had to happen. The Grothin's weakest point and his Stone Calibur's strongest point had to collide in one perfect final attack. Struggling to his feet, Gate turned to his horrified comrades. "Are you guys going to die here?" he asked, his voice raw. "If you can't provide support, we die? And the troops holding out outside will be wiped out too." The weight of the entire fortress, the entire war, suddenly rested on their trembling shoulders. Gate's gaze was hard as flint. "Don't think about anything else. For now, just think about how to defeat that monster. Focus on that relentlessly." He turned back to face the demon, his words spat out in a spirit of grim resignation. "What's the worst that could happen? We die." At Gate's fatalistic words, something inside Swan shifted. The all-consuming fear that had paralyzed him was washed away by a cold, placid calm. If death was inevitable, there was nothing left to be afraid of. His mind, now clear and sharp, began to work. A page from his old textbooks materialized in his memory. To bind a demon of Bekjaiban rank or higher, there is only earth summoning, Karastra. He recalled the lesson's critical detail. The binding power weakens the further it is from the earth. To work, it had to be activated with high-density mana when the target's head was close to the ground. Swan watched Gate square off against the monster, his mind racing. But how am I supposed to catch that thing when it moves so fast? He wondered. It'd be hard enough to cut him if he were standing still. The creature's combination of immense size and terrifying speed seemed to defy all logic. Then, an idea, born of desperation and intellect, struck him. "Wait, let's form a hypothesis. Physics, inertia, momentum." He spun on his heel, his eyes locking onto the other mage. "Junior Morris, can you cast a buff on just one of that thing's legs?" Morris stared back, aghast. "We're low on mana, and you want to give it to the opponent." Swan's face was a mask of furious urgency. "We don't have any other options. Hurry." Throwing his doubt to the wind, Morris shoved his staff forward. "To heck with it, I don't know anymore," he screamed, pouring the last of his energy into the spell. He unleashed a full-power strength enhancement buff, not on his allies, but on the charging demon's powerful left leg. The azure light of the buff enveloped the Grothin's thigh. Suddenly gifted with a burst of power it wasn't prepared for, the demon's perfectly coordinated sprint was thrown into chaos. Its supercharged leg overstrided, its balance shattered, and with a look of stunned confusion, the colossal creature tripped and went down, crashing headfirst into the stone floor. Swan didn't waste a hundredth of a second. "Now," he roared, slamming his staff into the ground and unleashing his most powerful binding art. Jur Pasticho. From the depths of the earth, the necromantic magic Kalasutra erupted, ghostly skeletal claws and purple tendrils snaking around the fallen demon, pinning it to the ground. Straining to maintain the spell, Swan called out, "Intermediate Gate." The name triggered another memory, of him watching Gate practice his swordsmanship. He recalled his own condescending thought at the time, watching Gate train the stone-crushing slash. Is that barbaric technique even useful in actual combat? How wrong he had been. As if hearing Swan's thoughts, Gate roared, his entire body tensing as he assumed the very position from that memory. Stance number 1. He heaved the greatsword over his head, every muscle screaming as raw power began to coalesce around the blade. Morris, seeing his chance to contribute, poured every last drop of his mana and life force into one final act, using up all my remaining mana. Enhancement. Strength buff. All in. A blinding blue light enveloped Gate. The sudden surge of power made Gate gasp. "Whoa, I take back calling you a good-for-nothing idiot." Empowered by his comrade's sacrifice, Gate prepared to unleash the ultimate technique of the IPSO Federation standard greatsword art. He called out their names, Morris, Swan. A final acknowledgement. In this moment, they had surpassed their ranks. "You guys are true A ranks." With that final thought, He began the motion for Basic Form 1. As his comrades screamed with the effort of holding their spells, Gate's world narrowed to a single point. With a final, unified roar of defiance, he brought the glowing blade down. The stone-breaking cleave descended upon the bound demon's head, a meteorite of steel and hope, aimed to shatter the unbreakable and end the nightmare once and for all. Time and space seemed to warp around the descending blade. Gate, empowered by the sacrifice of his comrades, brought the full might of the stone-breaking cleave down upon the Grothan's head. The impact was not a simple clang of steel on bone, but a cataclysmic explosion of force. The demon's single eye widened in a fleeting moment of shock as the supercharged greatsword bit deep into its skull. Morris and Swan, their bodies screaming from mana exhaustion, could only watch in horrified awe as their desperate gambit paid off. A network of cracks spread from the point of impact, and with a final, wet crunch, the Grothan's head shattered like stone. The colossal, white-bodied behemoth shuddered, its ancient life force extinguished in an instant, and then collapsed to the ground, shaking the very foundations of the cavern. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged, desperate gasps of the three survivors. Gate, Swan, and Morris stood amidst the debris, caked in blood and grime, staring at the corpse of the impossible foe they had just vanquished. A wave of disbelief washed over them, followed by the intoxicating rush of victory. They had faced a Grothan, a creature of nightmare, and emerged alive. They had actually done it. As the dust settled, a strange pulsating light emanated from the demon's remains. A grotesque, fleshy organ, a Grothan lip, a special part unique to high-class hosts, was ejected from the corpse. It landed on the ground with a soft thud, glowing with an otherworldly energy. Before he could even process the thought, Gate found himself reaching for it, his hand moving with a will of its own. A sudden, undeniable impulse seized all three Transcendents. It was not hunger, but a primal, instinctual command that screamed through their very being. Without a moment of hesitation, Gate raised the strange demonic organ to his lips and took a bite, the sound echoing unervingly in the quiet cavern. This was no ordinary spoil of war. The special part emitted a unique wavelength, a subconscious signal that bypassed all rational thought. For those who could perceive it, it scrambled the senses, mistaking smell for taste and triggering a primal compulsion. You must chew and swallow this. Gate was no longer in control. His body was acting on an ancient, irresistible command. As he swallowed, a torrent of energy surged through his veins. He could feel it spreading from his esophagus, tingling in every organ, a wave of raw power mapping out his own anatomy. This wasn't digestion. It was something far more profound, a complete merging of his own essence with the demon's. A grim smile spread across Gate's face as he understood. This was fusion. Gate's hand tightened around the hilt of his great sword, the familiar weight now feeling trivial. He swung the massive weapon in a wide arc, the air itself seeming to part before its new, terrifying power. Morris and Swan could only stare, their exhaustion forgotten, replaced by sheer astonishment at the transformation taking place before their eyes. The highly active proteins absorbed from the Grothan's flesh were rewriting his physical limits, boosting his strength to the absolute peak his body could withstand without breaking. In an instant, Gate's combat power had tripled. This was a secret of the battlefield, a truth not found in any Federation bestiary. It was knowledge earned only by those who survived the horrors of the Bloodlands. He turned to his squad, his voice low and serious. Listen carefully. He explained that the subconscious wavelength they all felt was a phenomenon unique to Transcendence. It was a shared, instinctual connection to this new source of power. Morris, still looking shaken, nodded grimly. Yes, sir. Gate laid out the new reality of their war. The fights from here on will be even more brutal, but there will be rewards at the end. He explained that the recipient of these rewards, these demonic parts, seemed to be chosen by the wavelength itself. So, he concluded, his gaze steely, information about these rewards will be shared only within the Transcendent Squad. The implications were clear. This was more than a battlefield secret. It was a pact. They were now custodians of a power that could change the tide of the war, a power that others would covet and fear. "This is our rule for surviving as Transcendents to the very end," Gates stated, not as a commander, but as a fellow survivor. "You understand what I'm saying?" His comrades, their faces a mask of grim resolve, shouted in unison, "Yes, understood." Swan watched their leader, a sense of awe mixing with her fear. Gate truly didn't think like a typical human. While they were still processing the battle, he was already looking ahead, anticipating the political war to come. He knew that in the thick of conflict, the ugliest battles were often fought not with swords, but against the petty, ambitious men hiding behind their desks. Gates' cynicism was born of experience. He saw the cowardice and corruption that festered up the chain of command. He knew, with a grim certainty, that those same men would try to steal the achievements of the Transcendents, and that the names of those who bled and died on this cursed ground would be quietly erased from the records. Elsewhere on the sprawling battlefield, an old, one-eyed veteran named Woody faced his end. A reptilian demon lunged, its jaws wide. Kawak dash. Time slowed. Woody thought, his mind flooding with regret. His life flashed before his eye, turning down a drink with friends for his daughter's sports day, his wife chiding him for his companions, the simple, mundane moments that constituted a life. It was a world filled with small joys, but now, at its end, it felt heavy with too much grief. But death did not take him. Suddenly, the demon before him shrieked and began to dissolve into particles of black dust. All across the battlefield, the same phenomenon occurred. The demonic horde, an unstoppable tide moments before, was simply vanishing. The soldiers stared in stunned disbelief. A winged commander, seeing her chance, roared the order. "Situation clear. Drop the barrier." As the protective shield fell, the foul, demonic swamp that had poisoned the land began to recede. In its place, white cloud trees sprouted, their very nature anathema to demonic energy, a clear sign that the threat was neutralized. The oppressive, toxic air was replaced by a clean, fresh breeze. The weary soldiers took deep, relieved breaths as Gate and his two young companions emerged from the cavern. As they stepped into the light, the entire Federation army turned to look, their saviors revealed. From a high ridge, a scarred elven commander watched, his heart pounding. "I was ready for total annihilation," he thought, recalling the brutal opening ambush. He knew victory was only possible because of the quick reaction of the veterans and the unbelievable feat accomplished by Gate and the other Transcendents. They had earned this miracle. A slow smile spread across the commander's face as he looked upon the cheering army below. They did it. His voice was filled with disbelief and pride. Those kids actually did it. The entire valley erupted with the triumphant roar of the Federation forces. An archer ran up to clap Gate on the shoulder, but the swordsman merely grunted and pushed past, his focus elsewhere. Nearby, a dark elf smirked, casually chewing on restorative wallhemp leaves. His moment of respite was cut short by a winged officer who descended to chastise him. "Who said you could chew wallhemp leaves without a rest order?" she barked. "Each unit, do a head count and report in." Gate overheard two other soldiers complaining about the officer's theatrics, one boasting about how easily he could handle the Bloodlands himself. A flash of contempt crossed Gate's face. These fools had never faced a white-body host directly. They had sat safely in the back, and the true danger of this war had never even touched their skin. He saw it clearly now, the vast chasm between the soldiers who had faced death and those who had not. For many, this was just a victory to be celebrated. They had no grasp of the true gravity of the situation, that this was a do-or-die struggle for the Federation's very survival. In the newly established Federation temporary outpost in the Groten Bloodlands, Woody oversaw the grim accounting. 11 wounded for dead. A memorial of swords and flowers stood as a somber tribute. An archer nearby drew her bow, her expression grim. The time for avoiding sacrifices was over. Scouts on the newly erected walls were already spotting demonic Giz creatures probing their defenses. The enemy was relentless. "Looks like taking the Bloodlands isn't the end," One of them mused. We'll have to get used to advancing. The war was far from over. This was just a new front line. Woody bellowed across the camp. Asen, with me. The work was unending. Even as they built their barracks, materials had to be moved to reinforce the perimeter. There was no time to rest, no time to grieve. The older soldier, Asen, groaned. Can't we have the kids do it? My knees are full of fluid. Woody shot back. When a giant moves, the job gets done fast. Get out here. As if on cue, Gate appeared, effortlessly hefting 2 massive stone blocks, and began carrying them towards the wall. Woody watched him go, a silent understanding passing between them. Woody and Asen stared in utter disbelief. What the dash? Isn't that heavy? Asen stammered. Gate, muscles straining but posture steady, replied curtly, it's manageable. Woody knew just how heavy those stones were and roared at his friend. No, you fool. Come here and try lifting it yourself. Asen watched Gate's display of impossible strength, his eyes wide with a newfound respect. So this is what it means to be a Transcendent. Gate, for his part, paused to look over the ruins. The traces of Federation civilization left in this demonic territory were a painful reminder that this entire continent was once their home. His thoughts were interrupted by a soldier snapping to attention. Personnel office, mid-rank swordsman Norman, bringing news from Enlistment HQ. Woody, ever the gruff commander, crossed his arms. Can't you see we're busy? What is it? Norman's news was significant. The Deca weapon revelation has been completed. Woody's one good eye widened. Already? That's faster than usual. The revelation of a Deca weapon was a major event, a sign of a powerful new warrior joining their ranks. A ripple of excitement passed through the camp. The veteran soldiers, weary from constant battle, were desperate for reinforcements, especially a powerful new direct junior. Gate turned, a flicker of interest in his eyes. HM. Norman knelt and delivered his report with ceremonial gravity. Yes, sir. In accordance with the revelation of the holy weapon in Jeokun Mountain Pass, the Deca weapon gauntlet known as Rage Tier, its enlistment slot has been assigned to a giant. Woody grinned. Oh, a giant. Nice. But another soldier, a man with feral, yellow eyes and a vicious scar across his face, let out a low, predatory laugh. He had been waiting. So you're finally coming, he purred, a dark smile playing on his lips. My direct assistant. The scarred man clenched his fist, the metal of his own gauntlet groaning under the pressure. I don't know who it'll be, but start chanting that you're already dead. His smile widened into a terrifying, sadistic grin. Because I'm going to show you what real hell looks like. The battle was over, but the war had just revealed its new, terrifying dimensions. A map showed the Federation's foothold in enemy territory, a precarious advance. And a classified file detailed the secret of the demon's special parts, a power that could be stolen and consumed, turning the Eater into something more and less than they were before. At a desolate enlistment camp, a scarred warrior with feral yellow eyes stood before a new batch of recruits. This was Lieutenant Geit, a Transcendent sent back from the front lines, and his patience was non-existent. Attention, he roared, his voice cutting through the lax atmosphere. You think you're on a camping trip? Think this is still the golden age? Twice as loud. 3 times. His gaze swept over the fresh faces, noting with disdain the sheer size of the recruits from the giant clan. Even among these giants, Geit's sharp eyes singled out the true prodigies. There was trainee number 8, Goliath, a combat sambo champion whose physique was a testament to raw power and brutal efficiency. And then there was trainee number 1, Titan, the Iron Hero, a 5-time champion and world record holder in the giant clan decathlon. They were legends in the making, pillars of strength in a world desperate for heroes. Geit's lip curled into a cynical sneer. In a real war, against the unending tide of demons, flashy titles and athletic records were utterly useless. He found the entire situation infuriating. So why, he thought, his gaze hardening, has a Transcendent like me been sent back to this enlistment camp at such a critical time, when we should be fortifying the front lines? His frustration boiled over as he bellowed at the recruits again, the sound of his command cracking like a whip. the scene shifted to a memory, revealing the moment Gait received his orders. Two of his comrades, a sharp-eared elf and a white-haired woman, watched his departure with deep concern. "Lieutenant Gait, are you really returning to the enlistment camp's main base?" the elf asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "The manual states that a Transcendent must be stationed at the very front line. If the demons invade, how are we supposed to defend this base with just her around?" In the flashback, a grizzled, one-eyed superior officer gave Gait his new assignment. "Gait, you'll have to act as the instructor for the giant clan troops," the old man stated, avoiding eye contact. "It's an order from above, so no arguments." He then revealed his true, craven motive, adding with a sigh of relief, "Besides, it's way more comfortable working at the main base anyway. Let's just push through with this batch, okay?" Gait saw through the old man's pathetic excuse immediately. The new recruits were from the powerful giant clan, and the officer was terrified that the blame would fall on him if anything went wrong. To play it safe, he was bringing in a veteran Transcendent to take the heat. Despite the blatant politics, Gait accepted his fate with a grim nod. "Understood," he said, his voice flat. "Orders are orders. I'll be off." As he walked away, Gait paused to address the anxious elven soldier. Maurice, make sure you practice what I told you." Maurice, startled, could only stammer his agreement. Watching his formidable lieutenant depart, left behind, he could only hope that he and his remaining comrade could handle the front line on their own. Back in the present, Gait reviewed the training documents, his expression a mask of cold professionalism. He strode onto the training grounds, his presence silencing the murmuring recruits. But before he could speak, a tall, powerfully built giantess took the stage. "Step aside," Gait commanded, yielding the floor. "Everyone, attention," she boomed, her authority immediate and undeniable. The recruits grumbled, weary of being shouted at, but the officer paid them no mind. "Normally, the enlistment camp schedule allows for rest on the first day," she announced, her voice ringing with urgency. "But a situation has arisen. We will immediately proceed with physical examinations and ability verification assessments." Her gaze intensified. "One of you will lift the deca weapon embedded in the Red Cloud Mountain range and be drafted as a Transcendent." A ripple of shock and awe went through the crowd. A Transcendent, the deca weapon, these were words of legend. "The remaining forces will be dispatched to nearby units," the officer concluded. "Keep the honor and pride of the giant clan engraved in your hearts." Watching from the side, Gait was impressed. "She's doing much better than I expected," he mused, knowing she had practiced her speech every night while awaiting their arrival. Gait's attention was then drawn to a pitiful sight. Senior Officer Drenane, an elf, was slumped in a chair, looking utterly defeated. "Kill me," he begged. Reassigned from the front lines to kitchen duty, he was on the verge of collapse. "Those giant clan monsters, they eat way too much," he cried, grabbing Gait desperately. "I only get 2 hours of sleep. The other 22 are spent just cooking. I'd rather fight the demons." The rigorous assessments began. The recruits were ordered to line up and enter for their physical examinations. Afterwards, they crowded around a wooden board where the results were posted. A realization quickly dawned on them as they scanned the scores. The competition for the coveted title of Transcendent was already a two-man race. The stats confirmed what everyone suspected. The average giant clan trainee was immense, but trainee number 1, Titan, and trainee number 8, Goliath, were in a league of their own. In height, weight, grip strength, and endurance tests like the stone carry, they both shattered the trainee average, displaying a level of physical prowess that bordered on the monstrous. Their rivalry was not just one of skill, but of pure, overwhelming power. The other trainees looked on, a mix of awe and excitement on their faces. Titan was a continental record holder in the decathlon, while Goliath was the undisputed open-weight champion of combat sambo. "I guess we have to consider them basically on the same level," one observed. The air was thick with anticipation. They were about to witness the showdown of the century firsthand. Titan's supporters chattered excitedly, but he silenced them with a look of pure contempt. "Let them talk. Just ignore it," he commanded. Internally, he seethed with arrogance. He and Goliath were in completely different leagues, and he found the mere comparison insulting. With a determined stride, he began walking toward Goliath's group, an unsettling air of confrontation surrounding him. He stopped before Goliath, extending a wrapped hand with a disarming smile. "Nice to meet you. So you're Goliath?" he asked. Goliath, slightly taken aback by the direct approach, confirmed his identity and accepted the handshake. "It's a real pleasure," Titan said, his smile widening into something more predatory. The handshake became a bone-crushing vice. Titan's polite facade crumbled, replaced by a sneer of condescending mockery. "How's making money by getting your rear end kicked working out for you?" he taunted, his grip tightening with immense force. Goliath's face contorted in a silent grimace of pain and shock, realizing the friendly introduction was a raw, humiliating challenge. Another trainee, seeing the blatant aggression, tried to step in. "Hey, what's with you two on the very first day?" But Titan, without even looking at him, shoved him back with a casual display of strength. "Don't act up," Titan warned, his voice dangerously low. "Keep buzzing around me, and I'll squash you flat." He finally released Goliath's hand and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. A bald trainee named Baba approached Goliath, his face a mask of disgust. "That guy, he looks greasy and his personality is utterly foul," he said, shaking his head. Recognizing Goliath from his fights, Baba immediately became an enthusiastic supporter. "You're Goliath, right? I've seen you fight. Just wipe the floor with him during the trench fight." The words trench fight settled heavily in Goliath's mind, a clear premonition of the brutal test to come. His focus was broken by Baba's incessant chatter, who was now rambling about his mother and craving pastries. Goliath sighed internally, amazed that someone who looked so imposing could talk so much. Elsewhere, Geit conferred with Senior Officer Bronson in the mending room. Bronson was surprised that none of the Giants had sizing issues with their uniforms. The Giant clan themselves are a key military force, so the higher-ups are paying close attention, she explained. Besides, Moai himself is from the Giant clan. With 2 celebrities enlisting, you can imagine the effort they put in. Geit grimaced, recalling the old officer's callous words. While the Giants received custom treatment, the other races were an afterthought. Humans and dwarves are considered non-essential forces, he remembered the man shouting. So we were always short on sizes for them. Just tell the surplus troops to grab whatever fits and wear it. Night fell, and the order for lights out was given. In the barracks, the Giant recruits complained about the cramped, tight sleeping bags. Baba, lying awake, found it impossible to sleep. The excitement and tension of the first day lingered in the dark, keeping his mind racing. "My mom used to say that if you close your eyes and count to 100, you'll fall asleep," Baba whispered to his neighbor. He tried it, only to find himself more awake than before. Goliath lay nearby, listening to the chatter. "That guy won't shut up about his mom," he thought with irritation. "What a precious child." Suddenly, the flap of the tent was thrown open. Trainee number 1, Titan, "Come out," a guard ordered. Titan rose without a word and exited the tent, a faint, confident smirk on his face. Goliath watched him go, a sense of injustice settling in his gut. This was blatant special treatment, and it confirmed his suspicions that the game was already rigged. Titan was led to the office of the one-eyed superior Moai. The old man had a piece of paper ready. "What would you like me to write under the signature?" Titan asked politely. Moai simply told him to write whatever, and Titan penned a quick message. "Stay happy, Mr. Moai. You may have been a hero and a celebrity on the outside, but here, you're just another trainee," Moai lectured, his tone carrying no real weight. "Good. Since the Transcendent for this batch has basically been decided, just don't make it too obvious." Titan affirmed his understanding, playing the part of the humble soldier perfectly. Titan saluted smartly and declared his devotion to the training for the honor of the Giant clan. As he left, the officers behind him were thoroughly impressed. "Now that I've seen him in person, he isn't arrogant at all," Moai commented. "He's actually quite likable, a total A-grade recruit." The female officer agreed, thinking he seemed like a good kid. However, a shadow of doubt crossed the female officer's mind. she was suddenly reminded of her predecessor, the scarred warrior with the sadistic grin. She knew he would have seen through Titan's act and shown him what real hell feels like. Her initial assessment began to waver. Scratch that, she thought, her instincts telling her something was wrong. Outside, the two guards tasked with escorting Titan grumbled in the dark. "Why are we escorting a trainee this late?" one complained. "That Moai is such a pain." They turned to Titan, their irritation obvious. "Hey, we're short on time, so pick up the pace. Are you deaf or something?" Titan's pleasant demeanor vanished in an instant. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. A bunch of nobodies, trying to act tough by whispering. The guard whirled around, stunned. "What did you just say?" he demanded. Before he could react, Titan's hand shot out, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. As the guard choked, his partner stood frozen in sheer terror, unable to comprehend the sudden violence. "What is wrong with you?" he stammered. "Have you lost your mind?" The man in Titan's grip struggled uselessly, his life held in the palm of a monster masquerading as a hero. Titan's eyes, now glowing with malevolent power, stared down at his victims. "Powerless, penniless, with absolutely nothing to your names." He hissed, his true, arrogant nature revealed. "You subhuman beggars. What exactly do you intend to do if you can't even grasp the reality of your own standing?" A document detailing the training support protocol shed light on the military's machinations. When a Transcendent recruit from a specific race enters the main base, units comprised of that same race are temporarily recalled from the front lines to assist in their training. Once the Transcendent is officially selected, the entire support unit is redeployed, advancing back to the front to rejoin the combat forces. The system was designed to cultivate its greatest weapons, using their own kin as a whetstone. The guard's eyes widened in sheer disbelief, his mind struggling to process the sudden, brutal assault from a supposed comrade. "What are you?" he stammered, terror seizing his voice as an iron grip closed around his throat, lifting him from the ground. "Are you out of your mind?" he choked out, his partner frozen in fear beside him, witnessing the placid mask of a hero crumble to reveal the monster beneath. Titan's voice was a low, venomous hiss, his words dripping with an arrogance that had been hidden until now. "Powerless, penniless, with absolutely nothing to show for yourselves," he sneered, his eyes glowing with a menacing light. "You wretched beggars from other races. If you can't even grasp the reality of your own standing, what exactly do you think you can accomplish?" It was a declaration of superiority, a cruel testament to his belief that might makes right. Shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage, the guard's partner found his voice. "Are you insane? This is insubordination," he screamed, his accusation echoing in the tense silence. But his defiance was met only with contempt. In a blur of motion, Titan's hand shot out, seizing the man's face in a crushing grip, silencing his protests with an agonizing grunt of pain. With casual, terrifying ease, Titan lifted both struggling guards into the air, their weapons useless against his monstrous strength. "If you want to talk, talk. If you want to fight, then fight," he said, his tone mocking their helplessness. He then let out a theatrical sigh. "I also hate military life, and it's a pain to treat you newcomers with respect. Just send me to the brig, would you?" With that, he tossed them aside like broken dolls, standing over them as a hulking silhouette of absolute power. The two battered guards scrambled away and burst through the doors of a command tent, their faces pale with shock. "You pathetic fools." A voice boomed from within. An older, grizzled officer with an eye patch looked up, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Because of you two, I'm the one getting an earful," he grumbled, his expression promising no sympathy. Pointing an accusatory finger, the officer shut down their frantic explanation before it could even begin. "What reason would he have to do that to you? Why are you humans so desperate to express your envy and jealousy?" he barked, his voice filled with scorn. "Do you want to file a grievance against a trainee? What kind of inferiority complex do you have against the giant race, you sad little pups?" The officer continued his lecture, explaining the harsh reality of their military. The giant race, though small in number, possessed immense utility and strategic value. making them prized assets often dispatched to other units. He dismissed the two humbled soldiers with a wave of his hand. As they trudged away, defeated, Titan watched them go, a smug, triumphant smile playing on his lips. Another large soldier, Moai, approached Titan with a curious expression. "What are you doing?" he asked. Titan simply laughed, a hollow sound devoid of any real humor. "Oh, nothing," he replied. Moai's lips curled into a slight, knowing smile. He understood the undercurrents of power and conflict in this place. It seems, he thought to himself, like it's going to get interesting here. Elsewhere, in a place known as the Growth in GOP, Swan was deep in magical practice. Purple energy swirled around him as he focused his thoughts. "If I master this area of effect breathing spell for the swamp, I won't need a scarf anymore," he mused, before a flicker of confusion crossed his mind. "But why are they making us practice whistling?" His thoughts then drifted to his comrade. "I wonder if Intermediate Gate is doing well at the main camp." Inside the bustling mess hall, Gate entered just as a commotion was brewing. A soldier serving food sharply reprimanded another. "Watch your head," he snapped, while the much smaller recruit flinched. The recruit had asked for a little more food, only to be harshly rebuffed. Seeing this, Moai, a warrior with a wild mane of hair, stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "Give me the ladle," he commanded, his voice a low growl that cut through the noise. The server, intimidated, reluctantly handed over the ladle. Moai immediately plunged it deep into the stew pot, stirring it to bring up the heartiest ingredients from the bottom. He then piled a mountain of food onto his tray, an act of defiance that left the server speechless with rage. "You pig," the server thought, but dared not say it aloud, knowing he had just lost control of the pecking order. Gate joined Moai at a table, their trays laden with food. "What's all that on your heads?" Gate asked, noticing the cobwebs in Moai's hair. "Ah, spiderwebs," Moai sighed dramatically. "Being tall, we always carry them around. My house, the spiderwebs. Being big isn't always good, I guess." Gate considered this. There must be a reason why other human species evolved to their current height, wouldn't you agree? Nearby, two other soldiers were whispering amongst themselves, their eyes on Gate. "Hey, that instructor you were just talking to. I heard he's the Transcendent who cut off the heads of both Wurgle and Grothin," one said in awe. "But he's still an intermediate?" The other, a more analytical type, stroked his chin. "The promotion criteria must be strict. From a sociological perspective, if you look at the class system." Gate overheard their conversation and sighed into his meal. Suddenly, a loud crash silenced them. Titan slammed his tray down on their table, splattering food everywhere. "You guys clean this up," he ordered, his voice flat and cold. He turned and walked away, a cruel smirk on his face as the two soldiers stared at the mess, stunned into silence. "What the?" one of them finally managed to say. "That punk." Before the two could be forced to clean, another soldier, a quiet man named Baba, stepped in. "Give it to me," he said gently, taking the tray. "I'm going to clean up anyway." His companion was perplexed. "Are you a pushover? Why are you cleaning that up?" But Baba just smiled. What's good is good." Gate watched the exchange, his keen ears picking up on the man's speech. Which region was that accent from? He wondered silently. The scene shifted to a barren, dusty training ground. The day's exercise was called pillar sticking. An instructor stood before a line of massive, sharpened stone pillars. "This training is quite simple," she explained, pointing to a distant wall carved with demonic faces. "You just need to lift this pillar and hit the demon face pattern carved on the opposite side." She gestured towards Titan, who stood with his arms crossed, looking smug. "You all saw trainee Titan number 1 demonstrated, right? Just do as he did," she commanded, though her tone held a warning. "If you get crushed by the pillar, don't blame your comrades." The first few trainees tried and failed miserably, their throws falling short or veering wildly off course. A near miss, the instructor shouted in frustration. "How can there not be a single person who can get close?" Next, trainee number 8, Glayet, prepare. With a grunt of effort, Glayet hoisted the immense pillar onto his shoulder. Taking a deep breath, he unleashed a powerful throw. The pillar soared through the air like a missile and struck the target with a cataclysmic crash, shattering stone. The other trainees stared in stunned silence. "Oh wow," one whispered. "So that was possible." Titan gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of approval. Glayet received a thumbs up from another soldier. "Glayet, nice shot." Thanks," he replied, a bit surprised. "But your accent, where are you from?" the soldier asked. Glayet grinned proudly. "I'm from Seongdongrad in the north." "Why? Is it a bit alluring?" The soldier's expression shifted. "Isn't the north where the demon plague, Corona, spread?" Glayet laughed boastfully, pointing to himself. "Our stout tribe won't budge even with the plague. Only inferior humans succumb to it." The questioner pressed on. "But are there giant race habitats in Seongdongrad too?" Glayet's confident expression faltered for a moment before he gave a vague reply. "Well, it's adequate." Next, trainee number 15 stepped forward. The instructor called out. It was Baba, the kind-hearted soldier from the mess hall. He announced himself and hefted the heavy pillar. With a determined shout, he braced himself and threw with all his might, spinning with the momentum. The pillar flew, but not forward. It spun wildly off to the side, landing nowhere near the intended targets. Baba stood with his throwing arm extended, a single piece of chipped stone falling from his fingers. The instructor's face turned thunderous. "Are you rebelling?" she seethed. "Shouldn't you at least to hit it?" The other trainees murmured among themselves. As expected, in the end, no one hit it except Glayet and Titan. From his vantage point, Titan watched the display of incompetence with a look of pure disdain. A dark, contemptuous smile spread across his face as he thought to himself, "Fools." The eye-patch-wearing officer from before stepped forward, his patience clearly gone. "Before that trainee with the pouting face goes in, sing a song," he commanded, pointing at Baba. Trainee number 15, "Baba, one song ready." To everyone's surprise, Baba didn't hesitate. He immediately stood at attention before the assembled recruits, ready to perform. Baba began to sing a sentimental tune about his mother, but his voice was completely off-key. The other trainees winced and openly mocked him. "This is a buzzkill. Ugh, he can't sing for anything. Isn't he a mama's boy?" Titan, who had been watching with a flicker of interest, simply sighed. "How boring," he muttered, turning his back on the pathetic scene. A low, menacing voice cut through the tension. "What are you doing?" Titan's golden eyes, cold and sharp, fixed upon the struggling Goliath. With a casual, almost bored tone, he continued, "Are you really going to do this?" His hand remained clamped on Goliath's neck, an unbreakable vice of flesh and sinew, effortlessly asserting his dominance over the larger giant. Goliath's pride shattered. A strangled, guttural scream of pure agony and humiliation tore from his throat. The veins on his forehead bulged as the pressure from Titan's grip became unbearable, his mind reeling from the sheer, effortless strength that held him captive. He was a beast in a trap, powerless and enraged. The watching trainees could only stare in wide-eyed confusion. "What is this guy? What is this?" one thought, his mind failing to process the scene. On the ground, Goliath trembled, sweat pouring down his face as he gasped for air. The casual display of power had completely broken his composure, leaving him to question the reality of the monster standing over him. A dark, contemptuous aura swirled around Titan as he looked down at his defeated rival. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Keep doing what you were doing earlier." With a flick of his wrist, he pushed Goliath further into the dirt. "Keep showing off your strength, you brute." Pinned and utterly helpless, Goliath's bravado finally crumbled. "Hark! Let me go, ugh!" he pleaded, the words catching in his throat. Titan held him for a moment longer, savoring the victory, before casually releasing his grip and letting Goliath fall to the ground with a dull thud. The challenge was over before it had even begun. Titan knelt, bringing his face close to Goliath's. "Because everyone around you keeps praising you. You think you're some hotshot, don't you?" he hissed, his voice a low growl. "Not at all," he answered for him, a cold smile playing on his lips. "I know guys like you all too well." His voice was a venomous whisper, dissecting Goliath's very soul. You're just a sly one who sizes up your opponent and plays dirty. Nothing but a pathetic coward. Titan stood, towering over the humiliated giant. Look at you now. I showed you a little bit of my power, and you immediately tucked your tail. Embarrassing, isn't it? Titan's final words were a chilling decree, a law being laid down between them. If you want to have a good military life with me, stop being sneaky and testing the waters. Keep that innocent look on your face from now on. His golden eye narrowed into a deadly slit. If I catch you with those snake eyes again, you're dead. The other trainees watched from a distance, awestruck. Man, he really is a tamer, one whispered. He uses both force and words. His balance is incredible. On the ground, forgotten, Goliath clenched his trembling fist. The public humiliation burned hotter than any physical wound, a fire of pure hatred kindling in his soul. Elsewhere in the training grounds, the daily grind continued. Soldiers hauled heavy sacks under the watchful eye of their superiors. Hey, stop talking nonsense and come move this, an elf shouted at her comrades. Even your senior is working. They grumbled amongst themselves, complaining about another soldier named Asen who was likely slacking off. The very man they spoke of, Asen, paused, his head cocked. Howling, he muttered, a strange sound echoing in the distance. The scene shifted to the entrance training grounds trench fighting arena. An instructor laid out the simple, brutal rules. If you surrender or get pushed out of the trench, you lose. Got it. Start. In the crowd of shirtless spectators, Goliath scowled, his earlier confrontation with Titan still weighing heavily on him. A fellow trainee noticed his foul mood. What's wrong? Is something bothering you? Goliath shoved him away. Get lost, you fool. You're annoying me. Nearby, a muscular female trainee smirked. What's wrong with that guy? He's probably overthinking it because he knows he's going to lose. An instructor bellowed, calling the next match. Next, Group B, 8 participants. Prepare for trench combat. Prepare. The crowd roared as the combatants were introduced. It's a big match. Mama's boy, Baba, who's all brawn, versus David, the midget among giants. Faced with a colossal physical disadvantage, David immediately began to strategize. I need a plan to overcome this difference. I'll take inspiration from the red velvet hamster, a ruthless hunter that takes down large prey. He believed the key was momentum and assumed a bizarre, wide-armed stance, channeling the spirit of the tiny predator. Before David could even enact his hamster-inspired strategy, Baba simply walked forward, hooked an arm under him, and unceremoniously tossed him out of the trench. The fight was over in an instant. David landed with a thud, a look of complete and utter bewilderment on his face, a question mark floating above his head. The other trainees immediately began to mock David. That guy forfeited without even asking? What a joke. It's embarrassing to call him a fellow warrior. But David ignored them completely, a blissful smile on his face as he gazed at the sky, lost in thought. Whatever, say what you want, he mused. As expected, nature is magnificent. David threw his shirt over his shoulder, grinning. I can't miss watching this next big match live. An electric tension filled the air as the announcer's voice boomed once more. Next up, Group A, Goliath versus Titan. The two titans of the giant race entered the trench, the very ground seeming to shrink beneath their immense frames. Goliath cracked his knuckles, a cigarette dangling from his lips. I'm not in a good mood today, he growled, eyeing Titan. You're going to have to lighten it up for me. Don't blame me if you get hurt. Titan remained perfectly calm, his expression unreadable. What is this fool blabbering about? Goliath sneered. Go on, try to hurt me, you weakling. But Titan's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp as ever. You just gratefully size up your opponents and slyly test the waters. You're nothing but a pathetic, weak fool. The taunt hit its mark, but not in the way Titan expected. Goliath's sneer widened into a deranged, eager grin. Let's see if you can still talk when your limbs are broken, he purred, a predatory excitement gleaming in his eyes. Oh yes, yes. With a roar, the two behemoths charged, crashing together with the force of an earthquake. Goliath, with his raw power, quickly gained the upper hand, wrapping Titan in a bone-crushing bear hug. A triumphant thought crossed his mind as he squeezed. So strength isn't everything after all. But his victory was short-lived. In a blur of motion, Titan shifted his weight, using Goliath's own momentum against him. Before Goliath could react, he was airborne, flipped over Titan's shoulder, and slammed into the muddy ground. The spectators gasped. "Got him," one shouted, certain that technique had won the day. A more experienced soldier shook his head. "No, it's too soon to tell. Trench combat isn't about just throwing someone over." Down in the pit, Titan pressed his advantage, but Goliath met his gaze, a bead of sweat tracing a line down his temple. "Oh, so you've got some skills, huh? But even so, can't I just pick you up and throw you out?" With a surge of raw, primal force, Goliath's muscles bulged. He began to lift Titan, a man of nearly equal size, off the ground. The crowd stared in disbelief. Crazy, he just lifted that giant. As expected of a Titan, his raw physical strength is on another level. Hoisted helplessly into the air, Titan seemed to be at Goliath's mercy. But just as Goliath prepared to toss him from the ring, Titan twisted his body with impossible agility. In a split second, he had repositioned himself, wrapping his legs around Goliath's head and his arms around his throat. "Got him!" The tide of battle turned in an instant. Using his full body weight, Titan fell backward, dragging Goliath down with him. The giant's head was trapped in a powerful chokehold as his own massive body became the hammer that drove him into the earth. He fell backward and crushed him with his back. Goliath let out a strangled groan as the air was forced from his lungs. The impact dazed him, but Titan gave him no quarter. Springing to his feet, he hauled Goliath up only to slam a devastating punch into his midsection, the force of the blow echoing across the training grounds. Rage and pain warred on Goliath's face. This guy? That guy? He seethed internally, his vision blurring. He was being systematically dismantled, his pride and his body broken by this cold, calculating monster. Darn it, he thought, struggling to breathe. With another explosive display of strength, Titan seized Goliath and hurled him across the entire length of the trench. Goliath landed in a heap, skidding through the mud. For a moment, there was stillness as the two opponents stood on opposite ends of the pit, catching their breath. But the respite was fleeting. With simultaneous roars, they charged once more, meeting in the center with another bone-jarring collision. The spectators watched, breathless. "Whoa, they're going at it again already," one murmured in awe. "They're not even giving each other time to rest. That's insane." The battle devolved into a grueling war of attrition. They were a whirlwind of muscle and fury, locked in a desperate grapple. It was a contest of equals, Titan of strength, Goliath of skill. The fierce, unrelenting struggle between the two giants continued for hours. Both men were gasping, their bodies slick with sweat and mud. "You're going to pass out," Titan rasped, his voice strained. "Stop gasping and just give up, you brute." Goliath managed a weak, defiant smirk. "Tired? Then you get out, you scrub." Titan's golden eye held a glint of unyielding resolve. "I can stay up all night," he stated, the promise of endless battle hanging in the air. Seeing that neither would yield, the instructor finally intervened. "All right, that's enough," she declared, stepping forward. "Trainee number 1, trainee number 8. It's a draw." Titan cursed quietly, infuriated by the result. But as he stepped back, Goliath suddenly staggered. He coughed violently, a spray of blood erupting from his mouth before he collapsed to his knees. Goliath, his supporters screamed in terror. "Hey!" the instructor shouted, alarmed. But Titan paid her no mind. He moved toward the fallen Goliath, his intent clear. "Darn it, I said it's over," he muttered, his hand still gripping Goliath's arm. From the ground, Goliath glared up, his eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. As Goliath's eyes began to glaze over, losing focus, Titan raised his fist to deliver a final, unsanctioned blow. Suddenly, a calm, firm voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" The command was simple, yet carried an undeniable weight. Titan froze, his fist hovering in midair, and the entire training ground fell silent. It was Gate. The instructor stared, dumbfounded. You didn't even bother to listen to me. He's reacting to that guy's words. This final indignity, being saved by the intervention of another, was too much for Goliath. A silent, furious scream built within him. Forget it. Just try pulling out Decaphon. I'll turn everything upside down. The intense conflict between the two trainees remained unresolved as they trudged from the muddy pit. Time passed, and soon, the morning of the blade ceremony arrived. A horn sounded across the camp. Everyone, return your weekly tags. Trainees lined up, dropping their wooden tags into a collection box. Whoa, 6 weeks went by fast, one commented. The grueling training, which once felt like an eternity, was finally over. Even Goliath seemed reflective, a small smile on his face as he remembered their first day. One of Goliath's friends patted his massive back. I roughly calculated the scores, and it looks like you'll take first place. Goliath looked uncertain. Really? I don't know. It feels a bit ambiguous. Just then, an officer emerged from the temporary barracks. The tally for the giant race's troop replenishment points is out. Gate took the parchment, his eyes widening slightly as he read the results. The eye patch-wearing officer and the instructor looked over his shoulder, their expressions mirroring his shock. Is this for real? The instructor stammered. That's impossible. The results were undeniable. Titan and Goliath were tied for first place, both with an astonishing 973 points out of 1,000. A tie? The instructor mused aloud. Has there ever been such a case in the history of the blade ceremony? The old officer shook his head gravely. This is the first time. Gate folded the parchment, his expression cool as ever. A score is just a score, he stated calmly. Anyway, the weapon makes the choice. His words hung in the air as the scene shifted to the sacred ceremonial grounds, a desolate plateau in the Crimson Cloud Mountains, where the legendary Decaphon awaited. The eye patch officer stood before the assembled trainees. Due to the emergency on the front lines, the blade ceremony will proceed in an abbreviated form, he announced. Trainee number 1, Titan, and trainee number 8, Goliath, stepped forward. Titan immediately pushed past Goliath. I'm first, he said coldly. It's not like you'll make it anyway, so I'm being considerate. Goliath scoffed at the petty gesture. Yeah. Go ahead and beat your drums and blow your horn. Celebrate your moral victory all by yourself. The officer ignored their bickering. Trainee, warm up, he commanded Titan. Prepare to draw your sword. A look of intense, almost feverish anticipation crossed Titan's face. This was the moment he had trained for, the culmination of all his effort. Finally, he breathed. I'm finally getting to pull out a darn Decaphon. He stepped forward and placed both hands on the hilt of the colossal weapon embedded in a stone dais. Watching from the crowd, Goliath clenched his teeth. These irritating guys are getting on my nerves, he thought, his gaze sweeping over Titan and the other trainees. The moment I become a Transcendent, the real training begins. His focus was entirely on the future, on the power that was rightfully his. But Titan let out a powerful grunt, flexing every muscle in his body, pouring all of his strength into the attempt. But the sword didn't move so much as a millimeter. He strained again, his face turning red, but it was useless. What happened? The instructor whispered to the old officer. We can't be sure. It came out last time after doing that. With a final, desperate roar, Titan gave it one last try, but the Decaphon remained firmly planted. If this doesn't come out, that's a problem, he thought, panic beginning to set in. The other trainees began to whisper amongst themselves. What the heck? Is he really a bust? That Titan. The officer's patience ran out. Trainee number 1, your failure is confirmed, so step out. Titan refused to move, muttering, forget it. I'm still doing it. Gate stepped forward, his expression cold and unforgiving. Get out, you disappointment. Goliath's supporters erupted in laughter. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I knew that guy wouldn't be chosen. His personality is trash. They began to shower Goliath with praise. It's only natural that our Goliath, with his perfect balance of personality, skill, and looks, is transcendent. Goliath flushed, completely embarrassed. Please shut up. I'm so embarrassed I could die. The officer's voice cut through the celebration, grim and final. Trainee number 8 stepped forward. But Goliath, too, failed. The blade ceremony had rejected him. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Goliath stared at his hands, a single tear of disbelief tracing a path down his cheek. After Titan, Goliath failed too. Just as all hope seemed lost, an adjutant approached Gate. Intermediate Gate, I'm sorry, but this. He began hesitantly. It's such a rare case. It's practically a non-existent rule, but don't trainees get 3 bonus points for killing a demon? A flashback revealed the truth. During the pillar-throwing portion of their training, Baba had been instructed to throw a massive stone obelisk. With a heave, he launched the pillar, but his aim was terrible. The pillar flew wildly off course, landing far from the intended target. At that exact moment, a wild demon, having escaped the control of the demon army, was lurking in the woods nearby. By a 1 in a million chance, Baba's stray pillar descended directly upon the unsuspecting creature, crushing it instantly. It was a kill born not of skill, but of sheer, dumb luck. Gate absorbed this new information, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The adjutant looked at the updated scores. Trainee number 15, with bonus points, has 851 points. The old officer turned to Gate. There are no issues with the blade ceremony qualification. The old officer sighed, a look of weary resignation on his face. Oh, really? Hey, number 15, step forward. A wave of confusion rippled through the trainees as they turned to see who was being called. Baba pointed at himself, his face a mask of shock. Emmy, why yes, T-trainee number F15, Baba. The officer waved him forward dismissively. Oh, you two. It's your turn for the blade ceremony. Anyway, it seems this batch of soldiers doesn't have a Transcendent, so just go and put your hand in. The other trainees scoffed. The Decaphon's name was Rage Tier Gauntlet. Would a weapon of rage ever allow itself to be wielded by such a mama's boy? The consensus was clear. No chance. Nevertheless, Baba squared his shoulders and walked toward the dais. The Decaphon pulsed with a deep, crimson energy, its dormant power palpable. With trembling hands, Baba reached out and placed them on the hilt, closing his eyes and bracing himself for the inevitable rejection.